due to the change of room, it's not always easy to hear everything that's said when people are watching at home or watching online. So when you speak, please can you ensure that you speak as loudly and clearly as you can into your microphone to just make sure people can hear at home. I'm getting a thumbs up from Lawrence, so I assume you can hear us all clearly. Yes, excellent. Membership changes. We have Fiona Guest substituting for Sarah Talon. Thank you very much, Fiona. Very welcome here today. Richard Thake, you're also very welcome here today, substituting for Paula Hiscox. So thank you very much. I have no other apologies. Right. Members' interest. Members are advised that in respect of the debate concerning the Council's integrated plan, including the setting of the Council tax precept, the Standards Committee has exercised its power to grant a dispensation to all Hertfordshire County councillors from the requirement to declare any disposable pecuniary interest or declarable interest. Accordingly, there is no requirement for any councillor to make any declaration of interest in respect of this item of business. Members are reminded that Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 provides that if a member is in arrears of council tax for 2 months or more and they are present at a meeting where the council's budget or the precept is being considered, then they should declare this, and any such member must not vote on any matter relating to the setting of the council's budget or the precept. The provisions of the Section 106 of Local Government Finance Act 1992 apply even if there is an arrangement to pay off the arrears. Thank you. Members' interests. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interest or declarable interest that they wish to declare? Yes.
I am a school governor at Little Green. Today we will be considering an application to Breakspeare School, which is adjacent to Little Green. As a school governor, I have no part in any of the discussions with the school governor on Breakspeare School. So I'm able to take part in this debate today because I'm acting as a county councillor on this matter, not as a school governor, but I thought I needed to make a reflect.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lloyd. That is noted. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to declare that my wife is a teacher, primary school teacher in Hertfordshire. Move to London.
Councillor Thake.
Yes, thank you, Madam. I'm not sure if it's on. Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I am a trustee governor at Hitchin Boys School.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hebden.
Yes, I'm chair of governors at a special needs primary school in Hertfordshire.
That's excellent. Thank you, Councillor Wilkins.
And the list goes on. I am on the management committee of Hertfordshire Music Service, which gets direct funding from this authority. I am on the management committee of Chesterford Educational Support Centre, which indeed also is supporting direct schools grants to other areas in this county. And my wife is a music teacher.
Okay, that's excellent. I should start this. Councillor.
Sorry to try. It's just that Mark just. Councillor Watkin just tweaked my mind there that I should declare I'm a member of the Music Forum for Hertfordshire County Council, and also a governor of a secondary school in Potters Bar.
Excellent. Thank you. I should probably start this meeting by thanking all of you for all of your contributions to all of the schools around Hertfordshire and the music service above and beyond your role as county councillors. So thank you very much for that. Okay, just with regards to the agenda today, we've got quite a few items on the agenda today. 4 of them are just information items, but we are going to be working on the, I know that we have a number of members who have meetings this afternoon, so the intention is to finish this meeting this morning and working on the assumption that you have all received the papers in a good amount of time prior to this meeting. So I'm assuming that every single member of this committee has, as they always do, read the papers in advance. Thank you very much. Right. Item 1, minutes. You will see the part 1 minutes of the agenda, Lifelong Learning Libraries Cabinet Panel for the 22nd of November 2023 and the 4th of December 2023. Can I take those minutes, the minutes as a true record of the meeting? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Item 2, public petitions. We have received no public petitions to date. So we're going to move on to item 3 on the agenda. I would like to welcome and introduce Rachel Adler, who is our Director of Business Support, who is going to be introducing our integrated plan 24-25 to 27-28. Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, everyone. I bring to you the integrated plan panel report. As noted in section 1, you've got the purpose of the report to highlight the areas of the integrated plan which relate to this portfolio for the panel to consider and provide comments. And further to this report, members are asked to use the full integrated plan or draft integrated plan documents that are published on the website from the Cabinet meeting of Jan 15 to give more detail and background of the entire integrated plan. Just moving on, the report looks to summarise through section 2 the County Council's draft integrated plan, just drawing out the key areas within the draft budget. In section 3, you've got the recommendations for this report. Apologies, I should also say towards the end of section 2 in paragraph 2.14, it refers back to part A of the full integrated plan documentation, which that summary was taken for where you'll find much more detail on the council budget. Section 3 has the recommendations for this report, which we'll come to in just a second, around panel noting and commenting on the report, and for panel to also identify any issues they feel Cabinet should consider in finalising the IP proposals. And then just lastly from me, in section 4, you've got the background and the particulars of this portfolio. So paragraph 4.1 is just there to aid kind of navigation through the full integrated plan documents. And then in paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3, you've got reference to the part B for this portfolio, which gives you the financial detail around the revenue and capital budgets, of which are summarised in 4.3. You have the summary revenue table, which shows you the revenue budget for the education, libraries and lifelong learning portfolio, and the movements in summary between the opening and closing budget. And as mentioned, all of those line items are set out in detail in the part B, to which paragraph 4.2 references. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you very much for all your work on behalf of this panel to the IP process. Thank you very much to all the members who also participated in that. I know we had some members in this room who are actually on that panel, so thank you very much for that. This is what part of the process it's going to be going through on its way to Cabinet and to full council. Does anybody have anything they'd like to contribute on this today?
Well, really, if I may, just a sort of explanation. No, we're not going to sit here and go through the IP budget. I was part of the panel that looked closely at it, and that meeting, I believe, was recorded and broadcast. So that's where we use the main opportunity. Clearly, at the full Budget Council, we will hold our own views about some of the decisions that have been taken in this portfolio and others as well. So I think there's not a lot to be gained by going back over, if you like, old ground or interim ground. So all I will say is that we will be abstaining as a group.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful for all the work that's been done on the IP in this, and I apologise that for technical reasons, I wasn't able to get as involved in it as I'd wanted to, and I will feed my comments back about the IP again to the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, because I do think there's some issues around the way it works, but that's another story. But I know there's a lot of investment going into SEND and children's services. I still have concerns, and I've raised those with the rest of my group, about whether that's going to be enough to resolve some of the very considerable issues we've been discussing in recent months. I don't think there's any need to go into that in any detail here, Chair. We've had the discussions extensively at previous panels, but there is no doubt that we need a very, very significant transformation. I'm also very concerned about the issue around the higher needs funding and the fact that we have this significant disadvantage to other areas. So that remains, and I think we need to be flagging that up as loudly as we can as we go through the finalising of the HCC budget. So for those reasons, because my group will be working very hard on our own proposals, I'll be abstaining from this item as well.
Understood. Thank you very much, Baroness Taylor. Does anybody else want to do? Yes.
Just briefly, I'm sure the committee who weren't on the scrutiny have seen the email that was sent to you on Friday. And obviously, Sharon Send was included with the first recommendation. And I think you've highlighted a challenge which all of us in the chamber can agree on, which is, we're not getting our fair share of the cake nationally, and we need to continue pushing on that. And obviously the other recommendation was on the youth services. So really well, in light of the long agenda, I've made my comments in the other meetings, so I won't say anything else today on this item.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to echo what all these other people have said, and I would also be abstaining.
Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, we will be, I'm sure, having a much more in-depth discussion about this in the forthcoming meetings. So for anybody watching, yes, please, be of the understanding that there have been intense discussions about this through the integrated process so far, and as we move forward further into the process, there will be more. Councillor Taylor, I think just to mention, you're right. If you've got concerns about the scrutiny process, that probably isn't for this committee. But with regards to the other things you mentioned, you might be interested to know that we have already held a couple of meetings with MPs where we've been lobbying about the high needs funding specifically. It's an issue that we are very concerned with, as we are with the SEND improvement plan. Hence all of the work streams that are moving forward. But yes, absolutely appreciate your comments. Okay, so with that in mind, if I've got, yes, Count, yes.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Just to add to the comments made by the opposition, it should be noted that the IP recommendations will go before the Cabinet on the 12th of February, and then again full council the following day on the 13th.
Okay, so I'm just going to read out the recommendations in full, if you'll allow me. Panel is invited to note and comment on the content of the report and to endorse to Cabinet the proposals relating to the integrated plan in respect of education, libraries and lifelong learning portfolio. Panel is also asked to identify any issues that it feels the Cabinet should consider in finalising the integrated plan proposals. So members, if you could give me quite a clear show of hands if you are for this. 2, 6. Okay, I have 6 in favour. Those against? I have none against, and those abstaining? I have 5 abstaining. Okay, thank you very much, members. Thank you. Okay, I shall now move on to item 4. Actually, I may not move on to item 4 because I know that Simon Newland is going to be here in a few. Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, I would now like to introduce for item 4 Kate Leahy, our head of school planning, who is going to take us through Hertfordshire County Council's admissions arrangements for 25-26. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, this is paper gives you the outcome of the public consultation exercise, which is an annual process we go through in terms of any changes to our admission arrangements. The changes we went out were relatively minor, £4 reductions, a minor change to Hertfordshire Primary School, and some clarifications to existing admission arrangements. There was a very low level of response, only 25 responses received, most of which were positive, and therefore we're recommending that we to you that we should go forward with those recommended changes as consulted upon.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yes, so you'll have seen from your papers the specific recommendations. I will read them out actually at the end because you should already have read them. Members, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to contribute to this? Thank you, Councillor Watkin.
The comment just to say, Chairman, that actually we've been through these proposals, got the right word at the moment, and I think the committee was happy with them. We certainly were happy with them. There was nothing contentious there, so we will be supporting this.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No, this is, pretty non-contentious, and we know that in the main schools are happy with the recommendations. So panel is asked to note and comment upon the report and recommend to Cabinet that the County Council's admissions arrangements are amended as follows. 1, to reduce the PAN at 4 community and voluntary controlled primary schools. 2, to give children from the parish of Hexton additional priority for admission at Hertfordshire Primary School if proposals to close Hexton JMI are approved. 3, amend the coordinated schemes for primary and secondary admissions are to improve clarity and internal efficiencies. And 4, retain the remainder of the County Council's existing admissions arrangements, including published admission numbers, relevant areas and schemes of coordination for 2025 to 2026. Members, can you please show me if you're, oh, sorry. Yes, of course, Councillor Lloyd.
It's on the recommendation. Apologies if I've missed it on what those improvements were. And even if it isn't reported, I think it would be helpful. Sorry, it would be helpful. Sorry, Lawrence. I'll ask the question again. It was to do with the improvements in the process. So most of the report I'm totally happy with. I will be supporting, but I just wanted to ask that quick question.
Of course, it's basically just some clarifications to the existing schemes of coordination. They're set out in paragraphs 4.1.5 through to 4.17.3, I think.
Yeah.
And it's really saying that there are 3 things which we'd like to improve upon. So one is saying that where we have academies who can choose to admit over their published admission number, that's something they can do within the code of practice. But currently there isn't a specified timescale in which they must let us know that. So in terms of our capacity to be able to make sure that all of those numbers are included in our iterative admissions process, we decided to include some timescales around that, which I think will be helpful in terms of clarifying that position for everybody, including own admitting authority schools. Also something that we already do, which is where we have a new school coming forward. As you know, we now have to ask for a funding agreement to be put in place with the Department for Education, where we open a new school because they will be academies. And what we already do is run a parallel process for new schools. So until that funding agreement is signed by the department, we can't officially offer those places. And although we've always done that through process, it hasn't actually been specifically in our arrangements. So we've been very clear about that now. So there's no sort of misunderstanding or ambiguity about that. And the third one is just about reducing timescales around responding to allocations. So again, just to try and make that process easier for parents and improve timescales.
Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, happy with the answers, and having worked on the admissions sort of 25 years ago when we brought the coordinated scheme in, I think these minor improvements will help and make it easier for parents. So more than happy to support the recommendation. Apologies to interrupt you in the middle, but I think that was useful for the committee to be aware of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is helpful to lay out exactly how those improvements are going to happen. So thank you very much for the question. Okay, members, if nobody has anything else on that item, can I please see a show of hands if you are in support of item 4? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Okay, now I'm going to move on to item 5, which is the outcome of the public consultation on the proposed enlargement of Lonsdale School from September 2024 through to the proposed closure of the residential offer at the school on the 31st of August 2024. I would like to once again introduce Kate Leahy, who is going to take us through this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this is to report back to panel following consideration previously to go out to consultation on a proposal to create an additional 20-day places at Lonsdale School, which is a school for children with physical and neurological impairment, through the repurposing of that residential accommodation provision, which hasn't actually been fully operational since 2020 for various reasons, both financial and operational. We sent out around 1,000 letters, and from that we received 53 responses, around 2/3 of whom did not agree with the proposals. But that was largely to do, particularly from parents who had previously accessed that provision. But as we set out, these were not new issues that we weren't aware of before we went out to consultation. And we do not think that actually anything has changed since we consulted in terms of the capacity to actually run that provision, either from a financial perspective or operationally. It also doesn't equate to the fact that we would receive a further 20 additional days in the county. So in terms of officer responses to those issues raised, they are documented throughout the report, but that was the predominant issue raised by respondents to the consultation. The governing body has responded specifically, and we've appended that consultation response to the report, and they understand the proposal, and so they'll work with the county council regardless of the outcome of the consultation. They recognise the contribution that the residential provision has made to parents in the past, but they equally recognise there hasn't been a way through working with officers and also with their health partners to actually find a way to make that provision either financially or operationally viable. They also set forward in their response that they recognise the absolute need for these additional 20-day places, which we don't currently have in the county. And I think, as we've set out in the report, we don't have another way in order to make those places available. And this accommodation, which wasn't fully utilised already, will provide those places for 20 children and also allow the school to enhance their own curriculum so that they can make a preparation for adulthood offer available to all pupils as opposed to only a narrow few. So I think their response was quite balanced, but recognised the challenges, but also the potential benefits this will open up for children in Hertfordshire. You'll see also in the revenue section, this could represent a very significant saving for the county council of over £1 million a year in terms of revenue. And that's because we will hopefully be able to offer children those places closer to their home and also avoid the need for placing children out county in independent provision. Although here I may say that actually we're struggling to find that independent provision for some of these children with very complex needs anyway, even if that is a pathway to choose for them. So on balance, we would recommend proceeding to statutory notice on this proposal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hebden.
Thank you. No, looking at the consultation responses, I did notice a rather large gulf in opinion between the current board at the school and the previous board at the school. Now, being a sort of school governor myself, you know, school boards normally evolve over time. But obviously, there's something else that's happened here. Can you enlighten us on that at all?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the governing body did have a discussion around the future for this provision. I think there was a split between governors who felt that there was something else that could or should be done in terms of trying to retain that provision. And for those governors who realised that actually that was not going to work, that they had gone as far as they could in terms of trying to find the future for the provision in its current context, and also recognising, as we talked to them as an authority, that the opportunity to use that accommodation to make those additional day places available was actually a better future for the school and actually provided a better future for more children in Hertfordshire. So I think there was a split between the board. Those that didn't want to continue on that journey decided to leave, and those that decided to stay reconfigured. And that's the substantive governing body as we sit here today.
Baroness Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. This school is in my county division, so I know the school very well. And one of our councillors at Stevenage was chair of governors here for, I think, 40 years. Magnificent term of office there. And she also knows the area around the disabilities that these children have very, very well. I've spoken to a lot of local people on this. I do understand the concerns of those who have disagreed with the proposal, and we've discussed this before at panel, so I'm not going to go over all the issues again, but I will just focus on the issues that people have raised. And I do think there's some more. The summaries of what's being done to address those concerns are fairly brief in the report. I understand why that's the case, but I do think some more reassurance is going to be necessary for parents around particularly the three very key issues. One is, the first two are kind of linked in a way, reducing the offer of the school to help these young people as they progress through their education journey and preparing them for life skills for the future. The report talks about an enhanced adulthood offer for pupils. I think we need to do a lot more work to persuade parents and governors and other stakeholders of the school of what that offer is going to be and how it's going to help prepare those young people for their future beyond school. So I wonder if Kate can expand on that a little bit. The other really key issue, and I think this was the big one for me, is the concerns about increased pressure on the school as the size of the school increases. Obviously, there will be a proportionate increase in resources to deal with that. But and I'm not so concerned about some of the planning issues, because if the school is going to change, then presumably those will be looked after through the planning process. What I am concerned about is these are children with very complex needs. They need very sort of specialist support and help in the school, and whether we are going to be able to recruit and retain sufficient staff to deal with the increased number of pupils there. And how that's going to work properly. There is a brief summary of how that's going to work in the summary of consultation responses. But if I was one of the parents there, I would still have outstanding concerns about how that was going to work. So they're my main concerns. I'm going to support the proposal because, one of our jobs as county council is to make sure we've got the provision we need. All the discussions we've had about SEND and the transformation process, I think, actually need this additional provision at Lonsdale for day places. And I do think the support for life skills after school can be done in a different way. So I will support the proposal. I do think we have to take those concerns of parents and stakeholders seriously.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the governing body response, you'll note that they have raised that they need to be supported through this proposal as well, but also I think really helpfully that they really want to proactively work with the county council to make sure that the proposal is a success. And one of those things that we talked about is enhancing that preparation for adulthood offer to all students. And I know that part of the, and obviously, as you said, it's not all about what you physically get out of the back of a proposal, but what the proposal will do in terms of reconfiguration of that accommodation is offer specialist spaces where all children can access spaces where they can get that part of the curriculum in terms of learning those life skills. There'll be a section where we've got a sort of a flat retained so that we can, learn those bits around learning to make beds, start to prepare food, all of those bits and pieces, which are so crucial in terms of alongside the educational offer. And that's part of what the school have said, that they want to work with us in order to make sure that that offer is as good as it can possibly be for all pupils. So in terms of the governing body's response to that, they have said that that is key to the success of this proposal, and that's what we're working with them on today. Here, I didn't know if you had anything to offer in terms of support we can offer from an ISL perspective, but it's fair to say that alongside the 0 to 25 team, our own officers and the governing body, we recognise that this is a really key part of the success of this proposal. I'll comment about it. I just didn't know if you wanted to do it in these parts.
I'll address the point on staffing that you made, because I think it's a really critical point, actually, and we're seeing this across the board. Now we're trying to escalate the number of places that we're creating at quite a pace now over the sort of last 12 months and the coming 12 months. There is then going to be an issue around recruitment of support staff and recruitment of teachers. So we have been I know Herts for Learning are coming along later for a paper. We've been in conversation with more of a conversation we've been planning with them in terms of this recruitment and retention issue. And they always put out information in relation to the groups of teachers, and they have events and things that are linked to bringing teachers in. But this year's focus is going to be also on support staff and specialist support staff. We're kind of in conversation about how we can do that, perhaps via a pool system or something like that that's localised, because we recognise there is a shortage. We also recognise there are some circumstances, given the pressures on schools, where some support staff are being made redundant as well, and some of the schools tell me that. So it's how we can galvanise the expertise that we have and share that between schools. We're in discussion around that because it is a critical point to any successful provision.
Thanks, Hero. Just to add to that, obviously there's 2 points to resourcing there. There's the financial resourcing and then there's the staffing. And I think Hero's tried to recognise that, it is an issue in terms of recruitment and retention of staff. That's not just an issue for this school, but we are looking at ways we can support that, because obviously part of the challenge for us in terms of growing provision is, once we're growing provision, that we can actually adequately offer those small support staff them, and the children can access those places when we need to. The other point is, of course, the school will grow by 20 places, and therefore they will be funded as such. So the funding will follow the pupils, and therefore the school will receive adequate funding in order that they will be able to start that provision at the right points in time. And generally what we do with the school, any school we're growing, is look at how to transition those pupils, particularly if we've got a building project. The idea in this instance is, because it's the first floor, we should be able to separate that out quite well before we bring new children into that provision, and then we can transition them in once the provision's available. So there's those 2 parts to it. That the place is growing will attract funding because there will be more children, and more children once we're able to into that new accommodation.
May I just come back in brief, Chair? Just two points. One is my slight concern about the staffing issue. We've seen Suffolk last week having a similar damning report on SEND that we had, and they will no doubt be doing similar sort of exercise and transformation. They're not very far away from us. So I think we just have to be aware that that's going to be another pull on the recruitment resources. The other thing is, I wonder, Chair, if we might have some further, once the adult preparing for adulthood programme is pulled together a bit more, whether we might have that back to committee so we can have a good look at it and satisfy ourselves that it's going to take the place of what was a residential programme. Thank you.
Yeah, I see absolutely no reason why that can't come back, probably within a body of something else, wouldn't you say, Hero? Because there's quite a lot of work that we are doing actually across the whole portfolio in preparing for adulthood, whether it's this, with our travel trainers as well. There's lots of work going on in there. So I think actually as a whole subject, it's worth bringing back and seeing kind of what that work is leading to in terms of outcomes. Yes. Sorry. Councillor Lloyd, you were next.
Yeah, picking up on the questions which were raised by the county councillor for that division, I think it would be helpful to have a couple of additional reports, not recommendations, which won't actually create additional work, because I think it's what everybody around the table is saying, so that we do get a further report coming back to panel, but it's broader than just this school. But my third recommendation would be that the county councillor has further briefings in the future to ensure that the concerns that have been raised are being addressed. Because I don't think those detailed points don't necessarily need to come back for all of us, but would be useful for you, Sharon, and other county councillors in that area.
Yeah, that's absolutely not an issue whatsoever. That's fine. Councillor Watkin, sorry.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And yes, I thought listening to Councillor Taylor was very instructive and informative, and she understands and knows the school better than I do. I'll be honest, I've not been there. And I think the point she's raised, I'm just going to make a comment on that at the moment, but I think we have to look at it in the wider context. If the resources of that school were being hugely used to support these children, especially if the residential accommodation was a key element of their educational experience and their children were using it day in, day out, then I have a very different view. It isn't being used. We know there's a huge demand for parents who are desperate to get their children into schools, ideally as close to their homes as possible. Here is a capacity, a resource with the staff who are skilled to be able to provide it. So I know the figures look on paper sort of very almost damningly, no, don't do this, 68% against 31% or 32% saying no against yes. But you have to ask the question, who are we looking for this school for? Is it for the present families of children, or is it for the future? And I think that's what's weighed in my mind, that we have to think about those families are in despair because they can't find accommodation for their children, so teaching for their children. So on balance, I think Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Taylor made some very good we listen to. I just wonder whether this committee can address some of those concerns. Could say that it might add a recommendation that no additional children should be placed in the school before there is staffing to support them. Is that a reasonable? I don't want to sort of load the organisation with an unnecessary, but clearly if there are more children going in and the staff being fully occupied, we don't really want them to be absolutely overstretched because then it defeats the purpose anyway.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Firstly, just to agree with you, absolutely right. This is going to be, creating 20 new day places, which, not only do we crucially need, but are part of our overall strategy to increase our special school places. I'm just going to ask Kira, is it within our gift to say that we cannot accept any children at the school until the staff are in place? I don't know if that falls. I'm just going to ask Kira for that because I'm not sure it is.
It's a really difficult point because obviously we commission the places from school, and what we try to do is negotiate with the school in terms of the appropriate time to start that provision that would then be an appropriately leading time to recruiting staff. My hesitancy around doing it the other way round is that we could then end up pushing that further down the line than would be necessary. So I'd much rather it that we are in sort of if we could word it, that we agree that between ourselves, between both parties, the suitable date that is in relation to recruitment and retention, being aware of that point. I know it's a really sensitive issue at the moment. It's really challenging. We certainly don't want to be, as you say, overloading unnecessarily, but equally, I don't want to let things go on too long because, as you also said, there are too many families that are waiting, so it's a fine balance.
If I may just suggest that we note our concern that there should be sufficient.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We can minute that and work out the best way to do it so that we don't end up not allowing any of those children to benefit from the 20 additional school places, but at the same time try and work with the school to make sure that they don't end up in the position where they've accepted those children they haven't recruited in the correct way. So I think that would be one to note down in the minutes that the officers, here is nodding, would be happy to take back and work with. Yes, sorry, you've been very patient, Councillor Fake.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Mark Watkin and I are obviously on parallel lines here. In the report, I picked up the very clear request by the governing body that whatever the outcome, and they seem to be prepared to, shall we say, go with whatever direction eventually comes. It mustn't impinge on their fragile budgets. And clearly, I think Mark was heading towards the same question I was about to ask in terms of what undertakings can we give the school to ensure that they are not put in that position. But equally, I think Mark put his finger absolutely on it. Who are we providing the education for? Those who historically have had the benefit of it, or the people who need it now and in the future? And quite frankly, I'm going to support this because I think it is absolutely vital that we make this change for a little used or underused or even not used facility that has served well in the past, but is now not fit for purpose for a number of reasons, and not necessarily within the school's control. In fact, absolutely not within the school's control. I think if I read the papers correctly, we must go forward with this proposal. But I do absolutely identify with the governors in terms of their requests which is embedded there, that we work with the school to ensure they're not put in a position that will impinge upon the capacity to deliver the education that they obviously can and are delivering to the other needy people within that establishment. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I mean, just to make one last comment, which is, you know, I know because I've asked this question previously, that the team are going to be working with 0 to 25 to ensure that they are looking at respite. So for those children, those parents that actually, you know, need respite, you know, might have been affected or might have felt that this was the residential section of this allowed them the respite. We are making sure that we're working with CYP and that 0 to 25 team, so that they are, you know, picking up any of those issues, because obviously we don't want to put any parents in our county who are already having a challenging time under any more pressure. So I know that piece of work is happening. So it doesn't look like I've got any. Oh yes, sorry, Councillor Hebden.
Sorry, I'm going to have to learn to put my hand up a bit higher. It's been like going like that for the last 20 minutes. But yeah, there were a lot of comments in the consultation that the facility that had been provided wasn't just respite; it was actually for the children to experience some form of independence. And but it's good that you know, if there's other options being looked at. The point I wanted to make, and Councillor Taylor picked up on it, and Mark certainly picked up on it, is with regards to funding and staffing and recruiting. I do know from experience that it's very difficult to know when you can start advertising for recruitment, because you don't know how much money you're going to get, and you don't know when you're going to get it. And that causes sort of uncertainty amongst our teachers. So if there could be sort of more information and more confirmation of dates and amounts given to the head teachers, I think they would find that quite useful, because there always seems to be lots of delays and sort of emails pinging backwards and forwards with regards to the funding. And it's the same for if you want to employ another member of staff, so that because a child needs one-to-one, for example, is that you know, if they need one-to-one for that child, then if they don't get the funding for the extra staff, then they can't provide for that child. But yeah, so I think more information for the head teachers as to when they could start recruiting and how much money they'll have to recruit would be very useful, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Hebden. I know that you have raised some of these issues with me previously, where you've been looking at schools who have known the funding was coming, but not when, and have wanted to move forward the recruitment process. So it's kind of left them in a bit of a difficult position. I think Hero is going to come back on this point.
Yeah, and I also appreciate the historical issues in relation to that. And I know that obviously Southfield is in this process at the moment due to the expansion from April this year. So we've done a lot of work to rectify that situation, to make that really clear in terms of when the funding would be available, and have had individual meetings with relevant head teachers around that. I think the challenge comes because different people may have different opinions of when that should be made available and how that should work, and then that's when we get into the back and forth. But we have been very clear around expansions for special schools that place and top-up fund will be made available when the time starts. So if provision comes online from April, that's when the resource is available. But where there's the setting up of an entirely new provision, such as specialist resource provision or a new special school, we may need to do that in advance of when that comes on, because of all the costs in relation to setting up that provision and getting the staff in place. So that's the model that we have been sharing with head teachers, to give you some reassurance.
Thank you very much, members. Just on this item, there is no separate part 2 recommendation. So if members of the panel are happy for us to vote on this without moving to part 2, could I see a show of hands? Okay, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much, members. In which case, okay, so I'm just going to read out the recommendations in full. Panel is asked to decide whether it recommends to Cabinet that it, 1, authorises the Executive Director of Children's Services to publish a statutory notice to enlarge Lonsdale School from September 2024 through the closure of the residential offer at the school on the 31st of August 2024, or 2, takes no further action, or 3, takes alternative action. 3.2. Panel is also asked whether it recommends to Cabinet that it approves the capital costs associated with the proposal as outlined in part 2 of this report. Okay, so members, I'm going to ask you if you are in support of voting on little 1, which is authorising the enlargement of Lonsdale School through the closure of the residential offer. Those in favour, please show your hands.
I thought we had, sorry, Chair, I thought we'd added some additional recommendations. So don't have a problem with that recommendation.
Yeah.
It's that you haven't read out the additional bits which you had agreed to, which I'm sure Carly can help you on.
Yeah, so sorry, I said with that we would note it in the minutes as something that you wanted to put forward as noted in the minutes, that Hero would take forward and be working with the schools and the admissions department to ensure. So that has been noted in the minutes. I will check the minutes very thoroughly prior to the next meeting so that I know that that has been noted, but Hero has also made a note of that, so that will be moving forward, but not officially as a recommendation. Yes, so with regards to the preparation for adulthood, we're going to be bringing that forward at a later stage to panel, not specifically about this school, but about all of the, yes, absolutely. I can't tell you which specific panel at this stage, but yes, I think it's a really interesting one. Thank you very much. Right, so those in favour of 3.1 little 1, please show. Yes, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And those in favour of 3.2, which is noted in part 2 of this report, please show. That is once again unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emma.
Yes, and I just correct what I said. The listed member for this school is Ronnie Herts, which I understand. Yes. There's been, the school used to be in my division. It moved into what was still my division, and then there was a boundary change and it became Ronnie Herts' division. So I just wanted to clarify that in case people thought I'd gone bonkers.
Thanks.
Claiming a school that is not in the division.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much, Taylor. Okay, thank you very much, members. I'm now going to move on to item 6, which is the additional capital funding for SEND projects at Breakspeare Special School and North Herts Education Support Centre, and approval of the Section 106 contributions to SEND and mainstream provision. And I would like to once again introduce Kate Leahy. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you said, this is a request for additional capital funding to deliver 2 major SEND infrastructure projects, which you heard about various times at various panels in the past. But this is the point at which we recognise that we need to come and ask for some additional funding in order to enable delivery of those. We're seeking additional funding to support the enlargement and relocation of Breakspeare School for children with severe learning difficulties, and that will provide 113 additional places, which you are all aware are desperately needed children in Hertfordshire with complex needs. The increase in that capital request is relating mainly to a change in scope to provide a functional school at the size that we're designing it to, and also the market conditions relating to the construction industry that has had a significant effect in terms of inflation in that time period. So and you'll see there's a part 2 paper, so I won't go into all of the details because the funding requested and the detail behind that and the risks are listed out in the part 2 report if you want to move to that later in the meeting. We're also seeking additional funding to consolidate North Herts ESC to one site in Letchworth. It currently operates from 2 sites which are unsuitable, one of which is in particularly poor condition. The increase in the capital being requested primarily relates to delays to what is a very complex site in terms of town planning requirements, and that includes planning constraints, which means that we have had to change the scope of the building which was originally being designed as a 2-storey solution and now needs to be 1-storey because planning will not allow for 2 stories in that location. It transpires. Both projects are required in order to meet our duty in relation to having sufficient SEND places and in line with our SEND school place sufficiency strategy. The cost increases have been flagged over time, but now we've done enough work in terms of feasibility. We're now coming to a panel for recommendation and to Cabinet to ask for them to endorse that increased level of capital, which can be covered through a combination of existing high needs capital grant and also some developer contributions, including community infrastructure levy. So I'll close there for now.
Thank you very much, Kate. First, I have Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, I will try and answer my question so it doesn't need to go into part 2. So if you think my question should be ruled out as part 1 question, please tell me and I would request part 2, but I will try not to. So I think I can be sufficiently generic in the question and say, this isn't the first time you've asked for more money. Will it be the last time? And how will you ensure that it's the last time? Because obviously there are many projects that we're trying to do across the county, and this is obviously important for the provision it's providing. I'm aware, because I've read the part 2 part, of the challenges and the reasons, which is why I'm not going to talk numbers and don't need you to, but I think it's an important question.
Thank you. I think it is a really important question. It's up to you because we are going to go into part 2. So if you would like to give up to you, Kate.
Well, I mean, without going into the technical details, particularly around the costs, which is obviously what moves it into part 2. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've acknowledged, particularly on this one, that this is an issue that we've been tracking through, particularly on Breakspeare for some time. And one thing I think we have learned a lot through this process is actually that designing special schools so that what we're going to get is absolutely the right outcome in terms of the future for the children. The fact that the buildings are going to be designed so that they are really fit for purpose means that we've learned a lot from this project. Because scoping it out from the beginning, you can make various assumptions about how that will work, but in reality, you really need that level of engagement with the governing body, the head teachers of the schools, to make sure that the buildings will work. But also, we've also now learned triangulating that through in terms of how that sketches through in terms of D&V recommendations. That's been a long journey for us. We've learned a lot. And actually, the reason we're coming back now, and we didn't come back a little while ago, is we wanted to make sure we'd got that right. So, yes, I appreciate the fact that we are here and we have asked for an enhanced offer for these schools. But what we know now is we have much more security around what we know about the sites, access, and also constraints relating to each. But we also have really good, well scoped out projects, and that learning is going to really help support us as we move forward into our next tranche of SEND projects, particularly any provision which is going to be built up from the ground up, if you see what I mean, and not just a consolidation of something or an extension of something where sometimes the offer is quite limited and you can only build where you can build. Here we had the opportunity to do something really good and a lot of learning to go alongside it.
Thank you. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, just briefly. I was expecting a clear answer saying, no, we're not planning to come back for any further money. I'm fully aware of the delays that you've had and that you've outlined, that you've learnt from that. So hopefully other projects won't be delayed as much as this one. But yeah, can you confirm that this will be the last time that you're coming back for money?
Well, as far as I'm able to, I will confirm that we have done as much work as we can on these projects to give us the surety that we have asked for an adequate budget sum to deliver these projects. What I can't do is tell you that there won't be something unforeseen when we hit site. That's always a risk. I know that we won't get into the detail of part 2, but what we have detailed in part 2 is all of the risk items that we have as far as we can put mitigation in for each of those, including cost mitigation, but also risk mitigation. So as we sit here today, I'm as confident as we can be that the budget sums we're requesting are adequate. But I wish I had the crystal ball to tell you that when we get on site, there won't be something unforeseen. But all things being equal, yes, we will not be back for additional funding on this scheme.
Okay, from having spoken this morning with the project team, my understanding was this would be the last time, and that you as the education team had told them that they will have to manage the budget that we are now giving them. What you're telling me appears to be slightly different.
No, just to be absolutely clear, that is absolutely the message. As you would expect from an education department to the capital delivery team, this is the amount we are requesting, and that is the amount we will work to. All I'm saying is that on occasion,
I think what Kate's saying is it's most likely that this figure isn't going to change, but she wouldn't want to, absolutely swear, because you never know what unknown things could happen that are completely beyond your control. But at this stage, we're the closest we've ever been because we have the absolute dimensions. We're pretty much there, but who knows what could happen. Yeah. Lots of interesting things, but yes, as sure can get, as near can get, without any laying down their life is guaranteed.
I'm comfortable with that. Right.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Thake.
I absolutely identify with Kate's position, having spent my working life in landed property. You do all you can, and sometimes there are contingencies that you can't control. So there you are. Madam Chairman, a sort of declaration really rather than a question. I support this because there is a huge need out there and a burgeoning need, and I'm delighted as a former governor for both Stevenage and the North Hertfordshire ESC with specific responsibilities for health and safety and premises. I know both Briarpatch and Bancroft intimately because I signed off the premises and health and safety things for year after year after year, doing personal inspections. They're not fit for purpose. This is an excellent project, and I absolutely endorse it and support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thake. That's really appreciated. I mean, this is really going to help us with regards to our school places. This is part of our wider strategy. Councillor Watkin.
You notice I said former governor. I'm not a governor.
Thank you, we won't get to details, but part of the capital funding for this has come from SIL contributions from local authorities. And tonight, Watford Council is going to be agreeing its contribution. I shall have to absent myself from the meeting, as I have been instructed by Dick Gloucester. My concern is quite simply, will there be any possibility these authorities being asked to contribute more from their SIL than they have at the moment? I note in the papers, I won't get to details, that one authority seems to be adding further, but I may have misunderstood it. But maybe that's a part two question. But the specific question is, are you likely to use any, would you call upon local authorities to come back and offer more from their SIL?
On this particular project, so when the SIL we've referred to in the paper, we haven't actually referred to the Watford SIL contribution specifically in this paper, partly because it's been quite swift work. And thank you to the members in Watford and to the officers in Watford for engaging on this project really rapidly. But what we've done in each, so that we've got 5 authorities to the west of the county, and we've engaged with each of those specifically on this scheme, asking for what we consider to be proportionate contribution to Breakspeare. However, I think what we've been talking to officers and councillors alike is that we do think that where we are going to be undertaking major infrastructure projects, of which some will be SEND, we should be engaging with those local authorities looking for contributions where they are proportionate to development. So we have had the conversations with each authority, and I'm really pleased to say, generally speaking, those have been positive. As you say, tonight, hopefully Watford will confirm their contribution. So I don't think we'll be looking for additional SIL money on this project necessarily, but certainly on future SEND projects, we will be coming back and asking for local authorities to be part of the solution.
Just to be absolutely clear, you specifically mentioning SEND projects as where you might turn, not other education.
No, I think we will. I think what I would recognises that we have already, the door was already open on mainstream projects. I think councils recognise in some ways mainstream's easier for them to associate that with their own constituents, and they see that as something that they can readily map. And bringing that into SEND, particularly where you've got school provision, which isn't necessarily, as we see in this project, in one particular authority. It's about engaging to say SEND is just as important, and we should be seeking those contributions just in exactly the same way as we do for mainstream.
Councillor Lloyd.
So from what you're saying, the 5 authorities, some have already approved and the others will be approving. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually misspoke because St Albans is not a civil authority, so it's the 4 authorities. One we're still in dialogue with. 3 Rivers has already made its commitment. We're hopeful that Hertsmere, the report indicated that Hertsmere would be taking this to Cabinet imminently. They've actually pushed that back by 1 cycle, but the dialogue's still positive. So yes, we are getting that level of engagement. We're still working on our position with decorum, but the other 3 authorities have agreed that they will contribute through the seal pot that they hold currently.
Just one final point. Yeah, the non-financial points that I could make and I will make at the appropriate points, because obviously it is in my division, but just to highlight, there are big concerns on the access. So yeah, people recognise the need for the school, but the access is still an issue. Just need to flag that up as a risk.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and I know that the project team and have had various dialogues, and we just need to separate the 2 things. Because what we will have is a town planning process, which we're currently in. We've done the pre-consultation on that, so we'll be getting all of the views from residents, from councillors in advance of submitting a planning application. And as part of that planning application, we will need to deal with highways. And whenever we build a new school, whether it's SEND, whether it's mainstream, we know that highways is inevitably a very significant issue and concern for residents. So through our proposal, we'll need to demonstrate how we're going to mitigate highways concerns, because there will always be highways concerns with any new school. To say that there won't would be disingenuous.
Okay, I've got nothing else here, so I'm just going to read out the statement about moving into part 2, if I may, members. Oh yes, yeah. Okay. I formally moved to part 2 for the following reasons: that under the section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the said act, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Please, can I have a show of support for us to move into part 2? Okay, that is unanimous. And now please may I ask all members of the public, Hearts for Learning, and anyone else who shouldn't be in the room to leave the room, please. Yeah, anyone who isn't an HCC officer, sorry. No. And we are just going to ensure that the live stream is paused. Is the live stream Okay, members, we are back live in our meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for your helping us moving seamlessly from part 1 to part 2. I'm now going to read out the part 1 recommendations. For members to show via a show of hands, panel is asked to comment on the report and recommend Cabinet that it 1, authorises the costs as set out in part 2 of the report for the following scheme. A, the permanent enlargement of Breakspeare School through the relocation of the school to the Durrant School former playing field site, Manor Way, Croxley Green. And B, rebuild and consolidation of the North Herts Educational Support Centre at Briar Patch Lane, Letchworth Garden City School. And little 2, authorise the application of the Section 106 funds as listed in Appendix 1. Members, if you're in support, please can I see a show of hands? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay. Item 7. Standards and quality in Hertfordshire schools. I would like to now invite and welcome Simon Newland, who is our Director of Education, who is going to introduce this report. Thank you, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was going to say 2 things about it first, before handing over to colleagues. The first one is that you'll see that this report is essentially about standards and performance, not in relation to children with SEND. So you may well have noticed that gap, if you like, when looking at the report. And the reason for that is that what we wanted to do was to come back to the next meeting of this panel with a greater focus specifically on outcomes for children with SEND, both with and without education, health and care plans. And I think to have included it within this paper would have, it's quite a lengthy paper with quite a considerable amount of information in. By treating it separately at the next panel, I think we can give it a greater degree of focus. I think that's important. And it's also an issue which we will be discussing with the SEND Improvement Board, and the same kind of information will go to them. So first of all, to say there's a reason why we haven't covered attainment of children with SEND in this paper, and we will come to it next month. The second thing is that this is one of our major purposes, the quality of education in our schools and the attainment of our young people. So much of what we do contributes to the outcomes in this report. And the outcomes are a combination both of our efforts, but also most substantially those of Hearts for Learning, who are our major partner in working with schools. And Hearts for Learning's role is both to work on activities which we commission through a contract that we have with them, which is funded by schools, in fact, but through a commission contract, but also because the attainment and quality and the educational experience of young people in our schools is a foundational purpose and objective of Hearts for Learning as an organisation. So they're contributed to this both because they're a contractual partner, but also because that's what Hearts for Learning is about. So I thought it would be helpful if, rather than me or Juliet talking on this paper, we hand over to Carol, who's the CEO of Hearts for Learning, and she can perhaps introduce colleagues and talk about any of the particular highlights. That's unless there's particular things that you want to say, Juliet.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I think Hearts for Learning are expecting me to introduce it and then for them to answer any questions. So I'm happy to introduce. We've got Carol Bennett here, Chief Officer of HFL. We've got Jeremy Laux and Liz Chaplin, who are Interim Education Services Co-Directors. And we have Ben Fuller, who's the Lead Assessment Advisor for HFL. So delighted that they're here and they will be able to answer questions as we go on through the paper. Obviously, as Simon has indicated, the paper that we bring to this panel on an annual basis
very much focuses on progress made in relation to the Hertfordshire Strategy for School Improvement 2021 to 26. And there are two key priorities, which are to increase the number of good and outstanding schools and settings, and to increase the pace of closing the gap for vulnerable groups whilst maintaining high levels of attainment. And the strategy helps inform the priorities for the HCC Hearts for Learning School Improvement Contract. The paper is very long, so I'm just going to sort of focus in on the kind of key messages that emerge from the paper. The first is that the results overall are very good in comparison with national outcomes across the key stages, particularly those at key stage 4. And in terms of Ofsted, as of November 2023, the percentage of good and outstanding schools was 91.1%, and that's 1.7 percentage points higher than the national figure. And again, the percentage of all Hertfordshire schools judged outstanding was 22.2% in November, and that's significantly higher than the national proportion of 15.8%. Particularly pleased that we've broken the 90% barrier of good and outstanding secondary schools, and 100% of secondary maintained schools are good or outstanding, which is great. Just want to draw your attention in paragraph 3. There is an error there. The last sentence should read the percentage of outstanding Hertfordshire schools as of the 30th of November, not January instead. So that was a mistake with the date. In the Ofsted table below, you will note that there is a slight downward pressure on the percentage of good and outstanding schools from the previous year. We have a higher proportion of schools currently judged as outstanding, and Ofsted have been focusing, as you will know, their inspections on those schools judged outstanding previously under the old former inspection regime. And the new inspection regime, which came into being in 2019, has much higher standards, so that has a disproportionate impact on the number of schools we have remaining outstanding. In terms of reducing the gap for vulnerable pupils, we still have a real problem. But I think it's important to draw your attention here to the caveat that the gap is exacerbated by the good performance of our pupils overall, with high percentages performing above the national average. The county continues its focus on reducing the gap, and school leaders work very hard, but they are facing many challenges in their efforts to reduce the gap. The ongoing impact of the pandemic, as we know, has affected progress and attainment of advantaged learners disproportionately across both England and Hertfordshire. And they're also facing other gaps, such as the focus and the need on things like behaviour, inclusion, etc. Finally, the paper sets out some of the activities that we have commissioned HFL to undertake as part of the core contract, and that's section 15, page 22. And some of this work is very much in its early stages, and we won't necessarily see outcomes straight away. Often it takes time to embed. I know that Carol and Liz and Jeremy and Ben will be able to talk about all of these in more detail for questions that you may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, and congratulations on the good results, getting over the 90%. That's fantastic. Firstly, I have Councillor Watkin.
Thank you very much, Helen. I find this report strangely confusing, if I'm honest, and I didn't think I was going to. I thought this would be an easy read and all sit back and say everything is going fine. And the opening remarks would lead you to that impression. In total performances in the first or second quintile for most Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 indicators. But when you look at the Key Stage 1, 2 and 2 and the early years, we're in the third quintile. Now, I find the term quintile confusing. I know what it means. It means that there are 5 bands and we're all lumped together, and then we decided on that themselves. But if we look at our profile as an authority and the sort of population that we have, you'd expect almost by its definition, we do have areas of hardship and poverty, undeniably, but we're generally a prosperous county. So I would have thought that we'd be expecting to be above the third quintile in virtually everything, unless for some exceptional reason. So I'm concerned about the early years only achieving third quintile. That doesn't seem to me to be aspirationally where I would want us to be. And early years, phonics, Key Stage 2, I've just got a few there. I do note, and this is very encouraging, that in a sense that progress has improved significantly. So by Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, we are at the top quintile, and our Ofsted report results indicate that our schools are probably some of the highest quality schools in the country, I beg your pardon. So I find I struggle with that. And we sort of allow ourselves, I'm sorry, Julia, it's an unfortunate way of putting it, we look at our bridging the gap and we say, well, of course, we're doing very well. So, of course, we struggle with getting our lower performing figures up to scratch. But the fact is, when you look at the free school meals, early years, we're in the 5th quintile, Key Stage 1. It's hard to say, but Key Stage 2, 5th quintile. So there's something about the early years that's giving me cause for concern. And I don't quite know why, because all the early years provision I know seems to be excellent. So that's why I say I'm slightly confused. And I do recognise, by the way, that what Herts for Learning do is outstandingly good. So there's confusion in my brain. So if somebody can clarify, if I've got this right, why are we weaker, apparently, pro rata, in the early years? And I think the trouble is, quintiles, we've rather lost this statistical neighbour approach. And I find that really valuable because that tells me other counties or other authorities who have similar characteristics, how we're doing against them. So the quintile may not be the most meaningful, though it appears to be on the face of it. That's quite a lot of rambling thought, but I hope there's some substance.
Thank you very much, Carol. Jeremy's going to come back on that. Hey, Jeremy.
If I might start, and then colleagues perhaps will add to my contribution. I think first of all, I think we would all agree that the concept of aspiration is really important here, and undoubtedly we would all be working our hardest to ensure that we get into that top 20% as opposed to residing anywhere else. So we would, I'm sure, absolutely concur with that. I think there is some reassurance to be had by the fact that those measures remain above national, despite perhaps being not in the quintile that we would like them to be. To say something briefly about the early years point you make, and of course it's absolutely crucial that we work our hardest to make sure that children get off on the right foot. If we get it right at the beginning, then it's far more likely that children will have successful school careers and beyond. I think it's probably important to note that that HFL education, kind of briefly Herts for Learning, works in 2 ways, primarily with schools. One on a funded basis through our kind of contracted work with the local authority, but also on a traded basis with schools and early year settings. And with some of those in some of that traded work, we work very closely with those settings, and on those occasions, the gaps tend to be narrower than the settings that we work perhaps less closely with. I think it's important to note that the different types of work that we do with our schools.
Morning. I'll just add a few points to what Jeremy's already said. And firstly, just so that people are aware, the early years foundation stage profile, the methods of assessment were completely changed in 2021. So that the comparison to 2019 data isn't really reliable because the DFE redefined the profile. So that's had an interesting impact. And it's worth noting that, of course, the measure that you're looking at, the good level of development, is a combination of a range of different areas. When we dig into the data, what we know is that it's the areas of literacy which are the areas where we're not where we would like to be, and clearly we would like to be in a stronger position. So a big area of focus is on looking at that. And anecdotally, we know school leaders telling us that since the pandemic, the children are at much lower starting points when they come to school than they previously were. And that's obviously the case all across the country. So I think the fact we're in the third quintile, which basically means we are broadly average, it is perhaps not a bad place to be, but it's not as good as we would like to be. And just to point out that amongst the eastern region, actually Hertfordshire is third out of the 11 regions in there. So whilst the differences are small, we are ahead of many of the other eastern region LAs.
Come back to that, yes, of course.
I understand, but all authorities have had to recover from COVID. So I don't find, sorry, that that's any exceptional reason why Hertford is doing better or worse than everywhere else. I still don't quite understand why we are in the fifth quintile for our early years and what are we doing about it? Is it the form of what has been in schools? It's as fundamental as that. If we're down at the bottom 20%, what we're achieving, there's something quite amiss there. Sorry.
Yes, in terms of the disadvantage gap is where we're in that lowest quintile. And obviously, yeah, that's definitely a concern and not where we want to be. And I think it's a complicated situation that we're trying to get to grips with on a school by school basis as to trying to sort of support where necessary those schools which seem to be finding this more of a challenge.
Can I just add one more thing, actually, in terms of that answer? I'm really less of an expert in the data, so I am going to pass to Jeremy and Ben for that specifically. But as you will know, HFL fills that kind of gap in the education system because we are a not-for-profit organisation. So we are constantly looking for ways to work with people who don't necessarily engage with us on a trader basis, because some of the work we do doesn't hit everybody. One of the things we know is also affecting the early years, and particularly in Hertfordshire, is the difficulty you have with recruiting and inducting staff. As you will know, support staff and staff in schools is really being hit at the moment, and particularly in Hertfordshire, because the cost of living in Hertfordshire is much higher, and therefore the wages, we need to pay more, and we're really struggling. And this is something Hero and I talk about a lot, because obviously it overlaps with the SEND issues we're trying to overcome. We do see a really high turnover in the early years. So one of the things we are trying to do, again, it's traded, but we're a not-for-profit organisation. So any surplus we make goes back into solving problems that are uniquely Hertfordshire problems. We've got a new early years leader, Louise, who has just launched this weekend a new induction toolkit. It's designed to be online, and cheap, but really accessible and high quality. So we can take people who have no previous early years experience, who have moved into a school or to an early years setting or a nursery or a PDI. They can complete that induction, and we hope that that will improve the quality of their interaction, because they'll understand the early years framework in a way that currently it takes them too long to get up to speed. So we're hoping that that kind of low cost, high accessible service will be have far greater reach than we're currently able to have in the early years, and that will alleviate one of the additional pressures. In a similar vein, I mentioned it the last I never know if you say ELLL, but in the last one of these committee meetings, we've also asked Rachel McFarlane, and again, this is any surplus from our trading goes into our additional work. Rachel McFarlane's retirement role is to work with us part-time to look at how else we can fill the gaps and the cracks in the system by expanding the traded work we do and getting better value for money for the core contract, the schools fund. So it's not ideal. We are trying to think creatively about how we have greater reach with the schools that the core contract won't cover, and also look at other areas. I do think recruitment and retention is one we're really going to struggle with over the next year. It affects the quality of every single school setting and trust in every single phase.
Next, I've got Marius.
I'm going to apologise straight away because I've got about 5 questions I've written down. Some for clarification. I'll start with the one that actually needs some clarification, please. When I read the beginning of this report, the opening remarks were that Hearts for Learning only focus on maintained HEC school. That's how it reads. So, and then you go on to talk about national averages national, Hertfordshire wide comparisons, etc., etc. So that's as a starter, as part of your standards and quality paper, it would be a good idea to clarify what you're measuring and how. Because that's how I've read it. That's the first point. So if you're nodding your head saying to me that's not the case, maybe change the statement to say actually you're providing data on the whole thing. So that's been clarified. That's a good thing. That's the first point. So moving on to the data. The first point stated that the standards have now returned. I'm assuming the standards you mean by examination standards have now returned back to pre-pandemic levels. I know this. When I heard about it last year, it concerned me because I think nationally, and I blame in some respects the government for pushing this, not necessarily the local authority, but I think we missed a trick with regards to the children that actually joined year 7 that were affected by COVID and are now falling under the knife really in some respects with this year's examinations. And I'm expecting to see the same trend that we saw last year, a downwards trend in results, in academic achievement, not the fault of the children. I think it's the fault of the system and the state there. So I think we're all to blame in some respects in that one. That's just a point to make. The question I've got is around phonics. So Key Stage 1 phonics screening. Can somebody clarify, are we still doing this? I'm a little bit confused because I'm getting a lot of mixed messaging from universities. I'm getting, from research globally, not just, the last one I saw was in 22. I think University College London did a paper on this. And if we don't trust one of our top 5 universities, and I think it's the top 10 in globally, to kind of come out with a paper that provides us with evidence to state, phonics just doesn't work. I'm a Greek speaking person. Phonics in a Greek modern language works because it's a phonic language. English isn't. Let's be honest. It's a mismatch of different languages pulled together. And I struggle with it. It's not a phonic language. So let's be honest. I don't understand why we're not taking the evidence. I think the evidence that was proved many, many years ago has now been proven to be false and incorrect based on one professor's research in the United States. So please somebody push back. I'm asking if are we doing that? Are we actually listening to the evidence and pushing back on this? Somebody, honestly.
There are various aspects and various lenses to look through in trying to respond to your question. I've
got 2 more, by the way, but
okay.
Start with that.
I'll be as brief as I can then. So in terms of pushing back, I think I suspect that may not be the role of Herts for Learning or its extension. I beg your pardon?
You play a part.
I think in terms of enabling the data that we report on occasions like this to be as strong as possible, it's important that we support our schools to be effective within the system we work. I think it's important to note that, as well as being cognizant of any research and the extent to which we can contribute to an educational debate nationally about it. To be more specific, we do work with our schools to enable them to be successful within the DFE framework that's set out around phonics. And so there is a system whereby the DFE validates a series of, or a set or a range of phonics programs that schools might choose to use. Within each of those programs, it addresses the point you make in terms of the phonics being available for children to be able to decode the words that they might not have yet come across, as well as appreciating and learning specifically the tricky words that might not conform to those phonics standards. So it's a very important part of our work for another reason, I suppose, which is that every primary school that's inspected by Ofsted at the moment gets a deep dive into early reading and their approach to phonics, and the effectiveness of their approach it comes under great scrutiny. To the extent, effectively, that where the school's phonics approach isn't successful, it's a challenge to achieve a good grading. Effectively, that's the importance attached to it, and I think we've probably around the table discussed many times that the notion of reading being a gateway subject and enabling access to all of the other subjects in the curriculum. Anyone wants to add to that?
I'm happy to add to that, just to say, I don't know the specific evidence that you're referring to, but I think there's a lot of strong evidence that in the early acquisition of reading, phonics plays a very, very important part, and that's the reason that it's checked in years 1 and 2. As children progress through Key Stage 2, as you rightly say, the English language is a lot more complex and there's a lot of sight vocabulary that children need to acquire, etc. But I think, as Jeremy said, that there is a statutory requirement for schools to teach phonics and for it to be assessed, and so we support schools in fulfilling their statutory duties. But yes, as children, and I think there's strong evidence that if children haven't reached the phonics standard by the end of year 2, then they will struggle in Key Stage 2. So it's very important that we get children to that standard by the end of Key Stage 1.
I just add one last thing, actually, because it relates to your previous questions about Academy and Maintain. So this, again, is kind of the dual-headed role of HFL. Our job is to make sure that whatever the system is, our schools thrive and succeed in it, but also to look for ways to improve it. So although we have to use phonics and support the phonics because that is what's used by Ofsted, and our schools will have to do phonics screening, we also are constantly researching. We've got a team of about 20 English specialists in primary and secondary who look to supplement that with evidence-based programmes. So you may, I hope, start to see our reading fluency programme all over social media. And I know many of you are governors, you probably see that too. The reading fluency is a very different approach. It's not phonics related, and that aims to help children read fluently and smoothly. It's an intervention particularly targeted at children in need. It's entirely optional, but many schools in Hertfordshire have chosen to do it, and it's now reaching outside of Hertfordshire. So it's an 8-week programme. Even as late as Key Stage 4, our latest test for that will improve the speed of reading within 8 weeks by a year and 6 months, because it helps to kind of smooth out the reading approach. So we have to do phonics, but we're constantly looking at other ways to supplement that. I guess, again, that goes back to the role of looking at system and then wider, what else can we do in Hertfordshire? So that's one thing we're trying to spread across the education system to help the whole system rethink how you help children become fluent readers. Goes back to, if you're a Key Stage 4 student and you cannot access your exam paper quickly and easily, you're not going to do well in any subject because all of the questions are going to be a barrier for you. And just adding on to the Academy Maintained, this is a really complicated, specific Hertfordshire point that HFL is so complicated to write a report about because all but something like 8 schools own and settings and trusts own shares in it. So we do work with all schools on a voluntary basis. They will choose to buy reading fluency, and most trusts have chosen to do that. The core contract sometimes relates to all schools if it's about safeguarding and send. And sometimes it relates only to Maintain schools if it's about standards, but we offer services to all schools in Hertfordshire. But that makes it really hard to write a report for, because it could well be that there's a school in your system in Hertfordshire that does not engage with HFL at all and chooses not to do so. And they may be doing really well or really badly, and they're also in the data. But equally, there may be a trust that engages more than a Maintain school, who looks like they're outside of the core contract, but actually probably takes advantage of more services than a Maintained school. So it's a really hard report to write, and I do appreciate it's confusing. We'll have a look at that again next time.
Be helpful. So I'll move on. Oh, do you want to?
Sorry, can I just pick up the qualifications and return to pre-pandemic standards? So in terms of Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, you're absolutely right. The government of Ofcom made the decision to return to pre-pandemic qualifications in their entirety, which meant that after the TAGs, which were the teacher assessed grades, and the CAGs, which were the centre assessed grades, the first year there was some buffer, and what happened in those cases was that there were elements of the exam papers that were optional for people. Last year, it was a case of the exams were exactly as they were in pre-pandemic standards. There was some slight buffer in the grading system, but not much. It was meant to be returning. I think what I would say is, Hertfordshire, Hertfordshire, we have to help our schools, help our children be successful, whatever the government
qualification. That's what they have to do. They have to go out and do that. And I think it's worth saying that although it finished in the financial year, the 2 years of coming back stronger money, you mentioned we missed a trick. Well, actually, nationally, in terms of Hertfordshire, the council put in quite a significant amount of money for coming back stronger, and a huge amount of that money was used for GCSE revision. We gave it to our schools. We had online services. We had online revision. So I think to some degree, the fact that our standards remained high and actually didn't suffer that downward push. Some of you remember the press in terms of the higher grades. We didn't experience that as other areas did, actually can be put down to both the great work that happened in schools, but also the impact of that coming back stronger money that came through. I would just add, it's not completely back to qualifications to pre-pandemic, because there are two elements that happened last year and they're carrying through this year. So students who are studying for GCSE maths and science will still have access to data tables and to information, so sheets for formula sheets, so they don't have to learn that going in. And as you know, what happened was we saw that English and reading and writing recovered quite quickly, where there was a challenge post-pandemic was in maths moving through. But I think you can see from the data that that's not such a significant issue in Hertfordshire.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Can I just, sorry, I don't mean to stifle any debate whatsoever because this is very interesting, but I just need to remind members that we have 3 more items to do after this item, and practically every single person here has indicated that they want to speak on this item. Plus this and the next 3 items are all specifically just info reports. So I want to make sure that we do get to the end of the agenda before lunchtime. So, Maris, you're going to come back very, very, very briefly.
Yeah, I've got one,
with very brief
one more question.
responses.
It's not briefly to answer, but a point to make. It is a question, because again, going back to the data, I only picked out one as an example here, but Key Stage 2 data that combined maths, what is it again? I forgot now. Maths, English, and whatever the 3 combined are, they combine 3 subjects in Key Stage 2. The percentage was around 60%. You mentioned about trying to support schools to improve their scores, etc. I haven't seen in here your measures how compare one with the other. So if you put if the score is 60% here, for instance, next time it would be good to see in the report what impact your work is doing to either improve or not improve the score. But it's good to see the differences and understand and make that clear in the report, so we can understand. Okay. Like I say, is it value add, or actually do you need to do something different? Is kind of my first point. And the last one was, you just touched on this, Liz, and others, STEM subjects. I'm a very passionate man about STEM. It's my background, not as a teacher, but in industry. I'm not understanding still what the strategy is, both locally or nationally. We keep talking about recruitment. I keep hearing about recruitment strategies, but frankly, I'm not seeing staff or people coming into the schools. We have a massive shortage in STEM. So if it's not working what we're doing now, can we look at something different? Because we really need teachers, and our secondary schools right now are lacking massively in that area. And it's a worry, because we're talking about year on year. I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing more people leaving. The percentage is actually more leaving than they're coming in. So that really concerns me. So it'd be good to understand what combined we're doing to address that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm not really sure that's probably one for stay or one for H. I mean, you might want to touch on it. I think it's, yeah.
I think, yeah, if I could solve the recruitment crisis, I think maybe, with respect, I wouldn't be sitting here. Like you might. It is a real challenge, particularly for maths and science, and that's because of the other opportunities. We also have to remember maths and science graduates do have opportunity for the fast track and teach first in different areas, and so we do know that we lose people from that. There are all sorts of things that are happening with initial teacher training. It's not just them. There are other areas that have bursaries, but I think certainly looking at recruitment and retention strategies are critical. And we also need to accept that in this area it is challenging. We're sitting in Hertford, and actually a school that is just literally 10 minutes down the road can offer a much higher salary. So there are all sorts of issues about salaries and recruitment, but there are things that we can do, and we are doing with schools in terms of training for people, in terms of conversion, physics training that happens through government MPQs and conversion, train to teach and conversion courses. But yeah, I would say recruitment across the board is probably the single biggest challenge that our schools have at this moment in time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now just going to go over to Baroness Taylor.
Thank you. And like you, Chair, I'm a bit having this item on a 7 or 8 item agenda where there are lots of other items on the agenda makes it difficult to do it justice, I think. First of all, I agree with Maris's last point about STEM education. I think it's really getting to a critical phase now. I have mainly big pharmaceutical companies in my area, and they cannot recruit to at any level, whether that's at the most basic level all the way through to the PhD students. So that's a real issue for the country. I just wanted to say, Mark said he felt confused when he read the report. I felt really depressed about it. That's because I first came on this council in 2008. There was a very significant attainment gap then between children, particularly children in my area. My division is one where 1 in 3 children live in poverty. And the report I always felt, and Herts for Learning was one of the responses to this back in the day, that the overall good performance in Hertfordshire was masking the issue for some of these students in areas like mine. And you know, I didn't understand Carol's point about because we're a high achieving county, that's an excuse for there being a bigger gap. I don't think that's right. We've got to do more to help our children get up to the level of the children that live in the areas where they're higher performing. Not say that that's a reason why they're not achieving what they should be achieving. And I find, you know, the fact that I appreciate the Key Stage 4 results better, that's great, hooray. But Key Stage 1 and 2, you know, that lack of achievement at that age will be life limiting for those children. There's no doubt about that. And it will be ambition limiting for them. And we do have to try harder to get this right. And I'm sure everyone is trying very hard. I'm not, you know, undermining the work that's being done. I wanted to ask the question about this series of activities under 15.2, because there's a very brief paragraph about poverty proofing working group and eliminating economic exclusion. I got really confused by this paragraph because there's some initials used. We talk about poverty proofing in one paragraph. The next paragraph, I assume PP means pupil premium, but I've got that really confused about that for a minute. But, you know, this poverty proofing, is that included in the pupil premium strategy document? How is that working its way through? It's absolutely critical. I think 16 years is long enough to have been banging on about this. And I think it's time we started to see some really strong in this area. And it can be done. The school that my grandchildren attend, which is Pear Tree School in Stevenage, is not only an outstanding school, but it won School of the Year last year. So it can be done. Why isn't that good practice that's put in place in those schools being shared so that all the children in my division, and their school's not in my division, can share that effectiveness? I don't want to be here in another year's time because I'll be coming off the council in 2025 and still seeing there's a significant attainment gap because children have a disadvantaged start in life. Sorry, it's a bit of a rant. No, I'm really strong about this. And 16 years I've been banging on about this, and we are still seeing a significant gap in attainment.
So can I start the reply to that? First of all, if I get the impression that that was okay, I'm really sorry. That was never the impression that I wanted to give, and it's certainly not the standpoint of HFL. It's something we all believe really passionately in. We have readable direct our focus on this area, as I say, using HFL's funding to really try and accelerate our work because we are so concerned. And if we look at the data nationally, tragically, it is the disadvantaged that suffered the most through COVID, because through COVID, we tend to see that the more advantaged pupils were protected from the impact of the education system being on pause, despite the fact that many schools in Hertfordshire did choose to bring back in pupils earlier. We can see in the data, and you can see through all national trends, the disadvantaged have been hit far harder by the pandemic than anyone else, which is naturally a massive concern for us. So if I can pull out something, I don't want to be here again, and I've been in Hertfordshire and in education for many years too. It's something we really care passionately about. So this year, there's quite a lot of programmes. We had a conference this year on serving the underserved. We had over 200 schools join us for that, where we did exactly as you've just described, fetched in people who've had great practice to talk to them about how they've managed to close the gap and how other people could learn from that. The Eliminating Economic Exclusion is a Hertfordshire specific programme where we visit schools and talk to them about the impact of economic pressures on families and how we can alleviate them. And again, trying to spread good practice. So there's a termly newsletter going out to schools at the moment, trying to spread that great practice about everything from reducing pressure on school trips to reducing pressure and alleviating support for music education, because we know music education has a massive impact on the rest of the educational standards of pupils. All the research takes us there. We've looked at the cost of catering. We've looked at how we can support uniform. I've not mentioned uniform. Yeah, I mentioned uniform. So there's a term in newsletter. I'm more than happy to share that with you directly, because that is one of the main things we're trying to do this year to spread good practice in and between some schools, because Hertfordshire schools do have some really strong practice. As you say, Stevenage is well known for its strong practice in closing the gap. But there are other areas. There are some really great schools in Watford, right the way through the key stages that we're trying to build upon. I don't know if you'd want to add anything else, Jeremy or Liz.
I just had one point, I suppose. I mean, it's a highly complex situation, isn't it? And there are very many different ways of looking at it and things to look at and consider. We might pick two to start with. One is about creating the right conditions for the child. So we know that children learn best when they are ready to learn, and everything that goes with that. So the child needs to be secure, well fed and nourished, and not feel that they are an imposter in their school, that they belong. That sense of belonging is proven to be so very, very important. But creating the right conditions for learning is certainly one part of it, and we've been working hard through the work that Carol just spoke about to improve that, but also to embed an absolutely rigorous approach in the classroom itself to making sure that wherever gaps are identified at whatever stage and as early as possible, being the most important point, that teaching addresses that through classroom practice. So really thinking carefully about what happens at the chalk face when children learn, because the attainment gap comes about clearly, as the name suggests, because there are things, there is curriculum content that some children are not learning as well as they should be and not secure. So rethinking perhaps those two lenses might help to collect and gather some of our thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to start to get just a little bit stricter on time, I'm afraid, because we still have quite a lot to get through. Councillor Thake, you're next.
This will be very quick. I'm going to refer you to page 15 in the report, agenda pack 167, item 11.11.1. I just want a clarification on the date. The Department of Education has introduced a requirement that NCER shouldn't be published until after the first statistical release. You then mentioned March 2023, which is a year ago nearly. Have you got right? Is it 2024 or is something happened? Why is that paragraph in there when we're talking about 9, 10, 11 months ago? Just don't understand.
I think that's an error. I think I should say March 2024. The point of that is really just to say that we're not in a position to report on the performance of children looked after at this.
I've got the input, just didn't understand the dates.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, I will take on board. You want me to be brief. I think the report itself is very important. We do need to spend time discussing it, but I think the summary could have been better. So obviously, happy to celebrate the things that are going well, but I think you need to draw out for us the problems that Councillor Watkin dug into, and also Councillor Taylor. And possibly, Chairman, we need to have the recruitment issue and the early years coming back as separate areas on their own to a future panel. But I think, I think you could have a red, green, amber for us for next year's report. What's great? What should we be focusing on? Because we're probably not going to focus on the great. We'll say thank you, because we appreciate what Hearts for Learning does do. And if you've been here earlier, lots of us are school governors, and I wouldn't want to be a school governor without your support. And I'm on a training course tonight, having been in meetings most of the day. So thank you. But Chairman, the question is really for you. Can we look at the recruitment issue and the early years one? You don't need to answer in detail, talk places, but I think we ought to possibly look at them in more detail at another meeting, because we haven't got the time to ask the questions I want to today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Lloyd. I'll discuss it with the officers and see exactly what format that will come back in, because I know this won't be the last time that HFL are here. So I don't know if it'll be focusing more on that specific next time you guys are here or looking at it independently. But I will come back to you. Right, I have one more speaker on this item, which is Peter.
Thank you. Just like to reiterate what Chris said about thanks for HFL support for school governors, whether it's training for the teachers, training for the school governors. Very useful indeed. Very much appreciated. I don't do we need a separate agenda item, another meeting for recruitment to retention? I can give you the answer now. Address the elephant in the room. The county council can only give to the schools what money the county council gets from central government. So we're giving schools an uplift of 1.6% this year, and the schools are going to pay their staff an extra 5 or 6%. So I think we can all do the maths there. It comes down to central government. If the central government don't give the local authorities sufficient money to recruit more staff, then the local authorities can't give the schools more money to recruit more staff. It's pretty much as basic as that. And as a Conservative member of this committee, I find that a little bit well, I'm not saying embarrassing, but one has to acknowledge it. And I don't know how much more information you want on why we're finding it difficult to recruit, but that's certainly one of the main reasons. I think the HFL and the county council officers are maybe a little bit too polite to turn around and say that, but so I'll say it. So there we go. That was quick enough.
Thank you. I think Simon, you wanted to come in, didn't you?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say a few sort of wrap-up statements at the end of the meeting. And one thing I think has been really positive about this meeting is the way in which members have identified what I think are the key issues facing the education system, and that's early years, that's the attainment gap, that's the recruitment crisis, that's the kind of technical debate about STEM subjects and phonics. So it's been really, really positive, I think, that illustration of the understanding in the local political system of what's important. So that's really great. I wanted to say a little bit about maintained schools and academies, and clearly we are, as a council, concerned with the attainment of all children. Every child matters in terms of how they do in their lives and their careers. But we do have a particular and special responsibility for, or duty towards, the attainment of children in maintained schools, because ultimately we're responsible for the standard in those maintained schools. So that's partly why we differentiate a little bit between what's happening in maintained and what's happening in academies. And of course, the contract with HFL, the majority of it is funded by funding de-delegated or handed back to the council by maintained schools, and that money is handed back to them, to us, by them, specifically and only to work on maintained schools. So we do have this particular focus as well in our own minds on what can we do for maintained schools. It's not that academies are unimportant or less important, but the funding that we have drives the balance of activity a little bit. Then lastly, I think the discussion about, we could talk forever about the attainment gap. It is a massively complex and intractable challenge, but we could also talk quite some length about early years. And I think we recognise that attainment in the early years foundation stage is not as good as it could be. And there's a range of things that we're doing to try to improve that. And there's a range of other things we would like to do to build on that. One of the particular challenges there is, of course, unlike the school sector, there are a very large number of providers, and those providers are all sorts of organisational forms. I mean, private businesses and elements of maintained schools. So we need to engage with them in a slightly different way to the way in which we engage with maintained schools. And much of the provision so far has not been publicly funded. So parents pay for their children to go to a private nursery and to get what they get. And that is a relationship in which we have a certain role in relation to standards, but not quite the way that we do in schooling. I do think, though, that the extension of the free entitlement of childcare will mean that the overwhelming majority of under fives provision in the county will be publicly funded over the next 5 years. And that will, I think, affect our role and the way that we interact with those PVR providers. And in recognition of the points that Mark and others have made about standards in early years, I mean, we are looking at how we extend our reach into the system. I mean, we reach a fair way with the training that Carol and colleagues do, and with a certain amount of funded support and intervention, but not actually a great deal. So we're looking at how we can extend that helping hand more widely. And that's a thing that, as the extra funding comes into the system for the entitlement, we'll be looking at using some of that to strengthen the offer that we can make to all those providers in order to achieve the objectives that we all share.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. Okay, members, I'm going to close off the discussion on this item. It has to be really quick, otherwise we're not. Okay.
Well, Simon mentioned the extension to 2-year-olds getting it. I'd like to know where the capacity to provide that education service for those children will come from, because we already have an existing system fairly well up to capacity. I think it's a challenge. I'm not saying for now, but very much like to have a paper coming to us for how we will meet that demand.
Just to confirm, we can do that. We've been looking at that, and we've got quite a lot of confidence that we're on top of that. But why don't we just bring a paper to a future meeting?
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, I'm going to ask you to note and comment on this report. All those in favour of noting this report, please show. Excellent, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. I would now like to invite Marietta Harrow, who's our Head of Achievement at the Virtual School, to just briefly introduce the annual report of the Virtual School Head. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good morning. I'm pleased to present the annual report of the Virtual School for the 2022-23 academic year. The Cabinet paper and accompanying annual report present an overview of statutory and non-statutory work of Hertfordshire Virtual School and highlight developments across 2023 in our work with children looked after, previously looked after, as well as with children known to social care. So our statutory remit is to improve the educational outcomes for every child looked after from preschool up to the age of 18 years, and to promote the educational attainment of previously looked after children through providing advice and guidance to families. This report summarises the attainment and progress of our children looked after of statutory school age, showing how we work to close the attainment gap and to ensure that children looked after have stronger outcomes and better life chances. It captures our training offer to professionals so that they can better support children with adverse childhood experiences, and it also describes a variety of interventions and enrichment opportunities for accelerating academic attainment and for expanding children's experiences, horizons and aspirations, from one-to-one targeted tuition and our metacognition project to the Miller's Kitchen summer work experience, Aim Higher residentials, music groups and an arts evening performance. In 2023, we increased support for our separated migrant children, appointing 2 virtual school personal advisors who have extensive experience of supporting the education of this particularly vulnerable group. One of our care leavers, himself a separated migrant child, was part of our selection and interview panel. His contribution was invaluable, and he also appreciated the experience and what he learned from his involvement. We've expanded our offer for the families that previously looked after children, as from January, bringing the role into our core team and providing continuity of support for children moving through adoption or SGOs from being looked after to being previously looked after. Our non-statutory remit to improve the educational attainment at a strategic level for all children with a social worker has continued to go from strength to strength, with our Safer in Schools boards leading strategic data mapping and analysis to enable really focused, targeted work with individual children who are most at risk. It's also initiated some new strands of work to support schools and to bring social care and education closer together to support our most vulnerable children. Over the year, the virtual school team has come together for several workshops to explore our strengths and areas for development, to articulate our vision statement and to determine our strategic aims and priorities for 2023 to 2025. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've just got 3 shows of hands. I'm going to take them in the order in which they've come. Marius, briefly first, thank you.
It is brief, sorry. I think we touched on a lot of it beforehand as well, but it does interlink, I guess, with this one. I just wasn't sure what we could do about it. So I think one of the opening statements in the document kind of summed it up for me, in that if parents aren't taking it seriously, what are we going to do about it? How do you close that gap? Because I feel very, very saddened about this situation. I think Sharon touched a bit earlier. This is not new. This has been going on for decades in the UK. And actually our trends are downwards rather than upwards when it comes to children in particular that require our support, and our care, etc., and all the kind of categories that are underlined here. So what can we do? What is the strategy to kind of solve this? I'm not, because I've read the paper, I wasn't quite sure what, it said a lot about the problems.
Yes.
But I couldn't understand what can we do if the parents and the families, or not just parents, but families or whoever's looking after these children aren't taking it seriously and aren't putting these children forward to go to school.
Well, I think we do draw on all the research, evidence-based interventions, and I'm thinking of Rachel D'Souza and the many different pieces of research and work that she's done with some of the most vulnerable children and young people, and she makes very sort of specific recommendations to across all sectors. So it's bringing together really multi-agency partnerships to do the preventative work, to identify the most vulnerable children and where the gaps are. And we know that now 1 in 5 children who might be deemed vulnerable are persistently absent from school. So much of our newer remit, and bear in mind that we've only been doing work in this area in the virtual school since the end of 2021, is to look across all the data. We've actually brought together now 48 different data sources across the local authority, and are working in a multi-agency way to really identify and put in place targeted interventions. We're looking at the specific areas that are most affected by persistent absence, working with those schools. I mean, one of the most frequent requests that I get from head teachers and designated safeguarding leads is, please, can you share any good practice you come across? Please, can you give any tools, tips, strategies about how we improve attendance? I think it's a really huge focus now for the whole of the education sector. And obviously we work in our relationship with schools. In our work with children looked after, it's different because we really can intervene and put in place targeted interventions. We have funding for that. With our extended duties remit, we have the capacity to do less, but we still nevertheless have, I think, already managed to operationalise significant analysis of data. And I don't know if you had a look at that bit in the annual report, where it just shows, even by the different DSPLs. We're actually building links now with our designated DSPL strategic body to work with them. We've got a meeting with them this Thursday. So I think we're really trying to think proactively, strategically, and make the links that we need to make across the different services. In fact, in the report, I've referenced some of because obviously I couldn't include all the recommendations that, for instance, the Children's Commissioner, the National Association of Virtual School Heads, the Education Endowment Foundation, all these different research UCL. I haven't been able to sort of incorporate all of that into the report because otherwise it would become extremely lengthy. But I do think that attendance is a huge focus. It's part of our Making Send Everyone's Business drive to improve our services across the county.
Thank you very much. Next I have Councillor Guest, Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. My question has already been asked and answered.
Okay, thank you very much. The last person I've had Councillor Lloyd first.
Yeah, I would like to say that your report is really well laid out. Being able to jump around it, you've put a lot of thought into it, and it captures the excellent work that you've been doing. So it isn't really a question, Chairman, but it is vital what you're doing for those children. So thank you very much. And could we try and do some of our other reports using these tabs jumping around? It was well presented in a different style of doing a report. So that's a request. Thank you.
Noted to the officers who are listening. I have got Councillor Watkin.
Yes, thank you very much. And when Mario started off, I thought, I wasn't following his line of discussion. And then I realised he's talking about your broadening role, which is open-ended, I fear. And then, in a sense, we need to sort of clarify that, because you've had the school has had a very specific role for a very specific community, enlarged with the separated migrant children recently, but it was a defined narrow team, and you had resources in schools, you had designated teachers you could work with, and the progress on that front has been very positive. So when Mario starts off with a negative, I think, but I realise that, but it sort of raises the fundamental question, because I'm worried, in a sense, in having to take on a much bigger and less defined role, which is solve the problem for all the children with hardship, which is sort of goes back to what we were talking to HFL. With your relatively limited team, you don't dilute core operation. As a corporate parent, I want to make sure my children are protected best. So I'm sort of really raising the tension of that in terms of how you can still make sure that you don't, because you're so busy doing other things, you'd be directed to do that, you don't lose the focus. And just an observation, and this is a way sort of maybe huge, this is very focused. I noticed that you held a conference at foster carers, only got 47 attendees. Now, don't get me wrong, 47 is better than none. It isn't very huge. In other words, what I'm really touching on is how can you effectively communicate with the foster carer community? And is it much more by virtually arranging events rather than physically expecting them all to go to a particular place at a certain time? It looks nice, big banners up, welcome to foster carers, but they're very busy people. It's probably, I think, I'm just making that point, looking at the communication with carers and how best to engage them. That's only one example. I may be unkind and even challenging on that, but it just struck me when I read it. A lot of time and effort went into not very many people actually getting benefit. But my main point is the dilution, the risk of dilution, I should say, on what is otherwise a continually upward curve. And the gap, the attainment gap that we see generally, I think the virtual school has done a great job for that children.
Thank you very much. I think in answer to the question about, the concern about diluting our work with children looked after, our education advisor teams are, if you like, separate from our team who lead on the strategic remit for improving the education attainment for all children with a social worker. And we're really careful to make sure that we do keep this work focused at a strategic level. So And I think just in terms of children looked after, that is where we have our pupil premium grant funding per child looked, for every child looked after. There is so we're doing the specific targeted work with children looked after that we aren't doing with children with a social worker, because we don't have the funding, we don't have the remit for that. So we're really very much focused on improving the education attainment of every child looked after. As I said, it is a strategic remit, and I think that's why we've got our Safer in School board and education hub. So we're working with professionals rather than working directly with individual children. With regard to, sorry, the second part of the question.
Really more just from the macro back to the very micro. Your communication with parents is organising a conference which must take place.
Yes.
47
Yeah, so that's just one means by which we offer training on a rolling programme of training and support to foster carers, and we work very closely with foster carers because we consider them to be absolutely crucial in supporting learning at home, in ensuring that we have excellent attendance, and in having those ongoing conversations with children, whatever their age, about what the future might look like, what their aspirations are, encouraging them to try a whole range of different activities and engaging in culture. So yeah, I think we're just planning our next foster carer conference now, and we do that in consultation with our foster carer focus group, with our children and young people's participation groups, and sort of looking at how we can expand. We're really conscious that we want to reach more foster carers, and actually not just foster carers, but key workers of children living in residential homes. So we are making the offer of the in-person foster carer conference open to all foster carers in and out of county, as well as with our key workers in residential homes. We did debate about whether we should move the conference online, but I think there is actually a desire post-pandemic for people to get together in person and have the opportunity. So we invite, for instance, libraries and the music service, services for young people along to the conference, the stall holders. So it's a chance to actually meet with different offers across different services and voluntary and community sector in Hertfordshire at that conference. But yeah, we definitely would like to increase the numbers, but we do also use obviously fostering and adoption professionals and their regular communications to our foster carers and key workers. And we're also making sure actually this year for the first time that we have all our independent fostering agencies aware, and the supervising social workers are promoting our foster carer conference and our other learning and support opportunities for foster carers, so that we know that foster carers are placing education as a really high priority for their child.
But thank you. Just before we go to the vote, I'm just going to ask Hero to just say a couple of words on this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Lloyd in particular, around your acknowledgement of the quality of the report. I totally echo that, and I just wanted to say a couple of points in terms of how we wanted the messages we wanted to get across from this report. We wanted to deliberately include the reference to the wider picture, so that we're not just completely focusing on the statutory remits of the virtual school, but that wider picture. And I wanted to, there is a tension around the widening of the remit of the virtual school, which is the word, Councillor Watkin, that you used. However, as a directorate across the Inclusion and Skills Directorate, we are addressing those challenges together. So you will note also Marietta made reference to the Making Send Everybody's Business and how the virtual school will be taking on additional duties in relation to SEND, but also the attendance and the other elements of inclusion as well around children missing education. We talked about the IP earlier on today's agenda, and part of that additional investment that we've talked about going into SEND and inclusion over the next year will be focused on the inclusion agenda. So it will be around improving attendance focus there, and those on reduced timetables and those that are out of education. And we as a leadership team across the Inclusion and Skills Directorate, which Marietta is a key part, we have services for young people, we have integrated services for learning, and now improvement and transformation service that David also sits in, are really clear on the lines of accountability and responsibility around these areas and spreading that across the directorate, so that we are bringing expertise in and areas of strength in to address some of our areas of challenge. And the virtual school is a really good example of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I would ask you to raise your hands if you have noted and are happy with this report. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. Okay, I'm now going to move on to item 9, and I would welcome and invite David Butcher, our strategic lead for intelligence and insight, to give us a very brief introduction to our 7 priority action and improvement plan. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Chairman. So members will recall the discussions of this Cabinet panel in November and December, quite significant discussion and time spent looking at the findings from the Ofsted and CQC inspection following that publication of the report in mid-November. And at that time, we set out that we were actively working on developing the priority action and improvement plan with a view to submitting that to Ofsted and the CQC by the 19th of December. That took place. We heard back from Ofsted as the lead agency early in January that they had accepted that plan in its format. So as we were required to do, we had to publish that, as did the ICB within 5 working days. So that all took place in mid-January, but really bringing that forward now for the oversight and information to this panel. In terms of the plan itself, you'll see it sets out details, not just in terms of the governance, but also links to the SEND strategy and how those priority actions and the areas for improvement are being taken forward through this transformation and improvement work. Other key updates in terms of that governance, the governance that's set out here, particularly in terms of the priority executive and the partnership board, both met for the first time in December, largely focused on the development and ratification of that draft plan. They've now met in January, in the case of the priority executive last week, 1st of February, so now up into the cycle of governance. You'll see from the plan, it links very clearly those areas for improvement and priority action back to the existing SEND strategy, but also sets out in quite a lot of detail the various activities to go forward. As you recall, particularly from the November panel, when there was quite a lot of update on activities underway that very much spoke to those improvement areas. This isn't all new work that's beginning from January, February, a lot of it very much in flight already. And so as part of those updates and the discussion here, you can start to see some of that progress already being made, particularly things like the Neurodiversity Support Hub up and running, formal evaluation underway. We've talked a lot about the Making SEND Everybody's Business investment. 82 of those staff are now appointed, 36 of them are actively on induction through the SEND Academy, so they'll be completing that detailed training and picking up caseloads from April. Again, I know colleagues from school planning have been here today in terms of that work around specialist provision and the updates there. More detailed update came to that November panel, but just to illustrate a range of that activity already in place. And then the final piece in terms of introduction, alongside that priority and improvement plan, there was quite a lot of interest from this Cabinet panel in terms of some of those emerging trends coming from other local authorities inspected. So at Appendix B, we just pulled that summary together to illustrate largely where we were just coming into early January. It's very much a moving picture. Local authorities being inspected, seeing those publications coming through of the local areas. So that sample size will grow, but it shows quite clearly, I think, some of the discussion previously, that under this new framework, particularly large authorities with high absolute numbers of education, health and care plans, and those who receive lower levels per head of high needs funding, are consistently coming out in terms of worse outcomes from the inspection. So that really was just an additional piece for member information. But that probably covers my introduction of that priority and improvement plan.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, Marius, I'm going to keep it brief, aren't you?
I am. Sorry, I must be on a roll today because I don't normally speak so often, but these papers have been quite riveting. So it's just a point, David. I thought it was a really good report, but I just want to make a point because when I normally read documents, even for work, acronyms are kind of explained. And I think, let me just find it. Sorry, give me 1 second. It was, so your presentation, the slides, I think it was, so page 243 on my pack, mentions in this nice little design graph, flow diagram, CYPs. But it wasn't explained what CYPs were. It's my fault, to be fair, because I'm sometimes quite ignorant for these things. I know what it means now. I mean, it took me a while, when I was reading it took me a while to figure out what CYPs were because there was nothing previously explaining what CYPs were. But the other point to note about CYPs, by the way, is it not CYPF? Because it has families in it as well, or is it just CYPs? I'm just being niggly on that one. I just thought in case, it does say final report, I thought in case you send it out to the public, they're probably going to go, what was the CYP? But that was the only thing I picked up. Oh, and the other thing was there was a B on it. Was it a B? A little drawing of a B on that graph? So or was it a smudge on my graph? Was it a B? Okay. So like a smudge. That's why I was double checking. Before you said it, before it kind of gets published, I thought make sure we don't. But everything else was good. I think it's the right approach. Is what we need, isn't it? Really? That was it.
No, thank you. And I think that's really helpful for all of the presentations that when we have acronyms, they have a specific, that was one of my bugbears, that they have definitions. So thank you very much for picking that up. Councillor Watkin.
This is going to be very brief, Chairman. First of all, recognition to Hero and David for what they've done to produce this incredibly detailed response to the Ofsted inspection. There's so much in it that, it's root and branch, and I think that's what the Ofsted inspectors would have wanted. But the fact that you've compiled it and it's been accepted, we're in that state now when it's over to you. It's always over to you, but far be it from us to start unpicking that. I did make a public statement that the only aspiration of the HCP is very short term in terms of your performance of getting numbers of achieved within the due time, etc., the accuracy. And at some point, I think we need to understand where you're heading to rather than alluding to it, which is, we expect with the extra 2 million we've got coming in this year and the extra 87 more, hopefully, it's 1 million. What do we think is what Hertfordshire SEND families deserve? That should be there. I couldn't read it, so I made a public statement on that. But everything else on here, I think, well done. You've worked hard, and it's shown in what you've done. And it's very interesting to have that comparative table of other authorities to give us a sense of context in terms of, it's not an easy ride. But we'll keep you to your mark, don't worry.
Thank you very much, Mark. And we are going to be looking at this time and time again through this committee anyway. As time goes on, it is a big piece of work. It has been accepted, and we are going to be monitoring it here at the SEND Priority Board and in many, many different places. So yeah, this won't be the last time we discuss it. Thank you very much for those comments. I'm just now going over the ether to Councillor Bross.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and well done to all concerned with the steps that you've taken hitherto. I want to raise a matter which I have raised privately, but I am concerned and I want an assurance that you are going to ensure that there is a fair spread of EHCP pupils throughout the county, and you're not going to make disproportionate allocations to specific schools. I have spoken to officers about a particular school in my division. I won't mention it this morning, but there is huge concern that you are just finding some schools that are willing to accept these pupils and are just shoving everybody into it. And it's not the right way, because my understanding is that there should be a proportionate distribution to all mainstream schools of pupils with EHCP regulations. So could I have that assurance that you will not disproportionately, please, supply these pupils to one or two specific schools?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to go actually very briefly over to Hero about this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brass. And obviously, I do know the school that you've made reference to, and meeting with that head teacher this afternoon, because it's a particular outlier in the current situation. The issue we have, why I can't provide total assurance of that, is that this is not a decision always for the local authority. This is in relation, well, it is a decision for the local authority, but we are bound by the legislation. And the legislation that is in place says that if a child has an EHCP, the parent has the right to make a choice of which school they go to. So it's called, the legislation is coined a parental preference. So they can put a request in for a particular school. And there's very tight reasons around why we would say no, they can't go to that school. In terms of, so in which case, it's not a case of fairly allocating across the board that we can say these children go here, these children go here, and these children go here. It's in relation to the preference that comes through. For a mainstream school, it's the particular point around the efficient education of others where we could overrule that parental preference. And that would be where there are significant high numbers in a particular class, not necessarily the overall numbers of the whole school. So, for example, if you had a very busy later year group, say year 8, year 9, year 10, but we are looking at year 7, that would be like starting afresh, and you'd have to look at those class sizes. And that's what makes it incredibly challenging. How we are working to address that, and that's again in relation to some of the investment coming through that's focused on our inclusion in particular, but also that is about raising parental confidence in the local schools that are available, so that they don't feel that actually I want to send my child there because they do a better job with children and young people with SEND. So it's about raising that bar of confidence. And part of the investment around the Making SEND Everybody's Business is to have 4 SEND panel managers in each of the localities that will look to coordinate the provision offer. So they will start with us from April, and they will support schools to coordinate an offer in that locality so the parents can see the range of choice and to raise that bar of kind of what they can expect from as ordinarily available SEND provision from their local school. The current situation is that there are schools that have that greater reputation, and that is encouraging parents, completely understandably, to put that down as their preferred school. And that's why we have the term magnet schools, that sort of skewed picture at the moment. So we're working to address that through the investment, but it's not something I can give assurance to, because there is legislation in place that means parents have the right to make that preference.
Okay, I've got one more person who requested to speak. Okay, Councillor Lloyd, you know the last. Yeah.
Just a couple of quick points. Mario, there is a glossary, like most glossaries. It's at the end. It's on page 50 of Appendix A, and it gives you all your little things.
What my point was, we normally write them at the beginning. So when you first...
No, you don't. You normally have them at the end in the industry I worked in, which was similar to yours. But anyhow,
I beg to differ.
Okay.
Well, either way, I actually have a glossary that was provided to me by the officers that I carried around with me all the time until I learned them. So perhaps it might be a nice idea to reshare that with members of the committee, so that we have it to hand whenever. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
My other point. Sorry. That was more just. Right. So I think the challenge that we've got, if I go to the right one, is where you've got a PowerPoint and you're highlighting very clearly in the Venn diagram the fact that Oxfordshire, Hertfordshire and Nottinghamshire, we have large populations, high caseloads and low funding. That message we have got to do. So I know later in this week, Chair, you will be seeing one of the MPs in Hertfordshire in one of our libraries. I hope you will be tackling him on this matter, and I will be reminding you on that occasion, because I will also be there to support you in asking him that question. Because I think all of our MPs, regardless of party and candidates in the forthcoming election, we have really, all of us as county councillors, got to be highlighting we've got to get fair funding, because having looked and been through the IP process, it has to be resolved. Right, if we go back to the 51 pages of the report, I think it will be useful, because obviously most of the dates are in the future, not in the past. Potentially to have it, you've obviously got all of this in Excel, but rather than having it as a PDF, I'm going to be particularly interested in what your red, green and amber statuses are, because we're not going to discuss all 51 pages on every one. I will particularly want to know where you think we've got a problem, and that's presumably where as a panel we'll want to look at, because if stuff's going well, well, thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. You probably haven't got on here, and how's the staff wellbeing going, and how are you managing to cope as leaders with the incredible amount of work that you've had to do since June last year. It must have been incredibly stressful. And yeah, thank you. And I will continue to monitor. And, you know, I think Simon said it's all of our responsibilities, whether we're the main party or the opposition or the officers, to work together for the best of our children in Hertfordshire. And I have the belief that everybody in this room is on that same page. So I think that is encouraging. There may be people in my party, there may be people in your party who want to make political points, but I think we need to say thank you for the work that has been going on and will continue to go on. And we also need to work with you, because some of the results are going to take longer than parents actually want to see. It's very clear that it's not going to be happening instantly, but hopefully you're making good progress on getting new people on board. That will then mean that the caseloads can come down, and hopefully people will get a work-life balance. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I very much agree with your comments that every single person in this room absolutely wants the best outcomes. And yeah, we understand how much work has gone into this. Hero, did you want to come back very, very briefly just before we move on to the lot? No?
Yeah, incredibly briefly, if I may, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. You know, absolutely. And I guess we are through the SEND project executive that met for the first time last week, that Councillor Clapper is a member of that executive, as of all of us here, chaired by Dame Christine Lenihan. We are absolutely looking at those areas where there may be some slippage, as you say, Councillor Lloyd, to make sure that we're addressing that. And I guess my question back, really perhaps for the Chair, is how frequently would you like us to bring a progress update through to this panel? We were suggesting perhaps on a quarterly basis that we do that, but I take your suggestion.
Yeah, I think we'll have to look at it, because we have the item that's coming after this, the some performance data, which comes every quarter. Plus, we're having the we'll discuss it outside here and work it out. But I mean, we definitely will be coming back to this panel with the kind of outcomes of those meetings. And then you have your internal meetings, don't you? So there's quite a lot of meetings, and there's going to be quite a lot of monitoring of this. And I should imagine in the short term, well, actually, in the very short term, there'll be less monitoring. In the medium term, there'll be lots of monitoring once everything starts falling into place from all the work action. And in the long term, when everything, I'm hoping, is much more positive than it is today, then there'll probably be less monitoring. So I think we'll discuss it and we'll come back. But rest assured, it will be monitored at this committee. Right, I'm now going to move on. Oh, sorry, members. I would now ask you to note and comment on the Hertfordshire's SEND Priority Action and Improvement Plan. Please can I see a show of hands for those who are in favour? Okay, that is unanimous. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm now going to move on to the last item of the agenda, and I'm going to once again reintroduce and welcome David Butcher, who is going to very briefly introduce the SEND and Inclusion Performance Quarter 3, 2023 to 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. And actually, a nice link from that previous discussion in terms of the monitoring piece, because panel's been receiving this report for I think 5 cycles now, so just over a year, and the format's tweaked a little along the way in line with feedback. But this is seeking to capture particularly the inclusion and skills director of the local authority piece, but clearly some very close links with the measures in the priority action and improvement plan. And so another way to use alongside the wider reports on the progress with all of the actions, but effectively gives a pretty good sense in terms of a number of those baselines that speak to the improvement plan. Members are familiar with the structure now, so conscious of time, rather than going into detailed presentation, very happy to take questions. Clearly, we will be tracking it in terms of that progress, but probably just 2 or 3 pieces in the same spirit as I suppose not all of the improvement activity is starting from now. Some of this is starting to be reflected in terms of the data from the activity previously underway. And just a couple of things that I wanted to just draw out and highlight with that in mind. We'd spoken at the last panel when we'd had the discussions around the timescales for new assessments and the work that was happening to clear historic backlogs. We knew that would have an impact on timescales in the October figures, and we saw that. But since then, 2 months of significantly improved performance in terms of that timeliness. And I understand from operational teams that that's continued into January too. Again, thinking about the provision elements and special provision, again, harking back to the previous item, just drawing out that reduction in the numbers who are on referral for specialist provision. We know that there's some ambitious targets set out in the improvement plan, but you can see that downward trend. And the final one, we touched on NEET in some of those previous discussions, so those young people not in education, employment and training. And just to draw out the latest comparator information nationally was published in November, and just showing that Hertfordshire is in the top 20% of local authorities in terms of that overall performance, thinking about not just young people who are not in education, employment and training, but also the proportions that are not known. And that's significant because our services for young people are really good, not just in terms of their interventions for those young people, but also in their tracking, which means that in some ways we set ourselves a higher bar because we've got a really good handle on our young people. But actually, adding those two together, we look even stronger, and that's drawn out in the charts. However, we know that there's that particular pressure as the percentages get smaller that we're focusing on for those vulnerable groups. So again, a thread that's run through this panel discussion across all of the items today, and just drawing out that the services for young people have secured funding to be able to take forward some specific work with some of those key vulnerable groups. The Year 10 Children Looked After, which speaks to some of Marietta's work, but also wider groups of vulnerable young people who don't traditionally engage as much in work experience placements.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for mentioning. I think it's important to note that although we are at very early stages with the work that we've been doing, we are seeing the green shoots, such as the timeliness of the HCP starting to move in the right direction. Obviously, we're not where we want to be, but it's very early days, so it's great to see that actually we are seeing some progress. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Okay, I'd now like to open this up. Councillor Hebden.
Thank you. With regards to children not in employment, education or training, on this committee, and also being a member of the Children and Young Persons Committee, is something that's brought up quite regularly. And Hertfordshire really is a county of opportunity with the large businesses and that we have growing in Hertfordshire, along with the film industry, etc., etc. I've yet to see physical or any evidence of what we're physically doing to actually change the picture and totally turn it around with regards to the numbers of children, with regards to the number of needs, particularly the more vulnerable ones. You know, we really could sort of turn it around and radically alter those numbers. I might be oversimplifying it a little bit, but you know, I believe that the opportunities are there, but you know, the number changes will seem very minimal, and I do think that whether it's more focus or maybe I'm just totally misreading it, but I just think we could really turn those numbers around.
Just to clarify, because I'm sorry, I was just a little bit confused by what you said. You're talking about a specific vulnerable group, because our overall numbers of young people going into employment education training, as is shown on the final slide in your pack, are really good. We benchmark really well against national and statistical neighbours. So David was highlighting it as an area of strength for us. I'm just wondering also whether the preparation for adulthood paper, Chair, that you suggested earlier, could also talk to you a bit more about all the work that Services for Young People and across our inclusion services do to bridge that gap for young people quite successfully.
Yeah, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but with regards to children in care leavers, where we're talking about 44% roughly, which, okay, it's roughly the national average, but you know, overall, I just think that we could be doing a lot more there.
So there's a specific paper on care leavers, that particular group, going into the Children, Young People and Families panel, the next panel.
I think Marietta would like to just very briefly comment.
I was going to say exactly that, because I've done on paper.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Watkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, this paper we could spend hours picking it. But I just wanted actually to focus in on schools, if I may. And I'm looking at the Ask Sally take-up, which, although its curve is going upwards, actually month on month the figures pro rata are not increasing dramatically in terms. I would rather like to see the figure going up. Stratospheric to give on schools. I know that the assistant director is very keen, or director is very keen that so much of this work should go through. So, question on that. Worried about the level of exclusions in schools, because the proportion of people getting pupils that are getting excluded are disproportionately children with special educational needs, and that is a very worrying picture for me. And then finally, I think actually there's one other one, but I just wanted to focus in on, if we're going to succeed in our aspirations to achieve our SEND strategy, the schools have really got to deliver at their end. I worry that there are tactical issues coming into play which are working against what we want. Are the schools engaged as much as they should? Are they looking for, when faced with a challenging situation, they take the more abrupt, blunt weapon rather than trying to work it through? So I think it's about, are we getting as much from the schools as we would like? I'm going to focus on that bit today.
David.
Thank you, Councillor Watkin. On the first one, specifically in terms of Ask Sally, I think that old adage of lies, damn lies and statistics comes to mind to an extent. And the reason I say that is because whilst this will capture the total number of calls, it doesn't speak to the intensity or the nature of the support that comes out from some of those pieces. So there's quite a lot underneath that, and different elements of support that are being opened up through that initial contact. So I think there's probably a really important piece in terms of reflecting that whole range of activity over the graduated response, that's not just trying to count the number of phone calls or emails initiating a new response through that service. That said, though, I suppose as we start to track year on year now as well, that as the word has got out, levels of calls are significantly higher than they were at the same time last year, which I think is speaking to that piece about schools being aware of that as one key route to be able to access much more than they were the previous autumn. So I think those two things in combination, I think you're right that we need to keep that track on what is it that schools are getting in touch about? How does that speak to the other sources of information that we have out there? We've included some of the information about the Valuing Send tool for the first time. And again, that's another support route through that same broad service area around the graduated response where schools are accessing support. So I think I recognise the point. I just caution that we don't just focus on purely that level of activity. Of course.
The exclusion.
And I think in terms of the exclusions, I think Hero may wish to come in there as well. But I think you're right to identify those increased levels, both in terms of the numbers of exclusions that we're being notified of, but actually also the pressure in terms of the work that then our access and inclusion and alternative provision colleagues do to try to find alternative solutions. So actually those numbers and proportions being withdrawn and a different route found fits there. But very much that's at the heart of the improvement plan and priority action, recognising the need for that systemic response.
If I can make one comment, Chair, then I'll keep quiet. I have to say I am absolutely dedicated to Chesbrook and Education Support Centre. I don't think there's been an exclusion in that community sector. I may be wrong, but I remember it came out in a recent meeting, and it's a lot to do with the way they engage and their whole strategy towards supporting the SEND inclusion strategy. And I just think there's some messages that should go out across the county that a good educational support centre can help us as a community of school of education, in delivering what we want, which is children placed into schools being supported. I just think there's some work to be done in that area. By the way, Chesbrook's having their Ofsted. Just heard. I'm wondering whether I should be called in. Who knows?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Watkin, for your comments. I've got nobody else. Oh, Councillor Lloyd, last but certainly not least.
Yeah, very, very briefly. On your Ask Sally slide, we've obviously got a lot more primary schools making use of it. Do you have any particular observations on why that might be the case?
I think we would always envisage primary schools as being forgive the pun, the primary recipient of the service, not least because that's the age where identified need will be beginning to emerge, and the patterns of that may look differently. The other, and I know Councillor Brass asked the question about the distribution of EHCPs across the county, but when we think about smaller primary schools, they will potentially have less recent, less familiar experience of dealing with some of those issues purely because of their size. And so for those two reasons combined, I think those are the more likely reasons why we might see primary schools particularly reaching out to Ask Sally. So the early identification of need and emerging need, but also the size of the schools.
Thank you. Hero, do you want to very briefly?
Yes, just one additional point on that. You'll note that peak times are around the points of transition as well. So reception year 2, year 6 is when we're getting the most calls. So we're doing quite a lot in terms of drilling down into that, and therefore, and you'd expect that, to be fair, because that's a point of anxiety for the adults as well as for the children. So you would expect that, but we're drilling down into that to see if there's more sort of preventative support that we can put in around transition. And just to come back very briefly on the point that Councillor Watkin made around schools delivering, and your concern around that them kind of meeting their duty to support the delivery of the SEND strategy. Obviously, we have so many schools in Hertfordshire, over 500, and there's some absolutely excellent inclusive practice that takes place in so many, actually, and I very much feel that the majority of schools really are taking this very seriously. And I think the inclusion of on the SEND priority executive, the chairs from all the forums, so not representatives as we've had previously, but raising that bar so that they are the chairs of the forums that take part in that. We'll make sure that if there is any concern around the delivery of that, that is picked up at the swiftest opportunity.
Thank you very much, Hero. Right, I have no other people notifying me of speaking, so I would ask members of the panel to give me a show of hands if they are happy to note this report. That's great, that is unanimous. There is no other part business that I've been notified about. The date of the next meeting is the 17th of April at 10 a.m. Oh, Councillor Brass, did you want to speak?
I wanted to say there's never any other business issue, but can we have at the next meeting something on libraries? Since you became chairman, I've not heard a single word about libraries, and it's meant to be a libraries panel.
Yeah, we've been desperate to bring in an item about libraries. Unfortunately, our agenda has been jam-packed, but we do have it down that we will be doing libraries. We seem to have had about 11 or 12 items on every single. Yeah, it's been quite SEND dominated since the run up to the local area inspection and following that. But yes, I've raised the same point. I would love to see libraries on this agenda. So yes, thank you. Very, very, very gratefully noted. Can I also thank all of the members of this committee for your time and contributions today. Once again, we've had a long agenda, and also thank all of the officers and all of our visiting presenters for your work today. So thank you very much. See you all at the next meeting.